whatever the deal is. Thank you all for attending. We're going to start this special strategic planning workshop of the HART Board. Please all stand for the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Now, if there's anyone that has signed up for public comment before we start our meeting, I'm going to call your names as soon as I get the list. Thank you, Linda. Okay, the first person we have on here is Miss Sharon Calvert. Miss Calvert, if you could see the microphone. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Sharon Calvert. I live in Hillsborough. Regarding HART's TDP vision plan, and I understand it's not currently funded. And I understand that we have a funding issue. I also understand that we double our bus service, and we're hearing of a referendum possibly in 2016. But if we do have a referendum, we should fund it locally, like we did the Metro Rapid, successful Metro Rapid. We should stand alone. The referendum should stand on its own merits and ensure that the money goes to exactly what the referendum promised. It should be short-term with a fixed end date, so we can see if it's successful and voters can decide to reoperate and expand it when it does expire. Transportation solutions must be based on mobility, not economic development, because those have totally different drivers. I'd like to say that I would not like to see HART restructured, of all the elected officials and repurposed. We cannot jeopardize the transit-dependent priorities, and changing the configuration of HART could jeopardize those priorities, and it can also more politicize our transportation solutions and jeopardize HART's current efficiency and focus on transit services. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list is Mr. Cosentino.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Leo Cosentino of Camelot, Florida. And I'm here to explain, and especially to my colleagues and fellow citizens, that one way to expand service to our district, to our county, and to our metropolitan area is sub-franchising jitneys. And we tried to do this with Plant City. We went to them and said, ask for money, run your own jitney service. They got $2 million, but they failed to do what we advised them to do, and that is find private enterprise to spend that grant money and operate their own jitney. So what they did is they took the easy road, it's understandable, and they said, no, let Heartland run that jitney or that system. And of course, when the money ran out, that was all over. So we're coming back again, only this time we're meeting with the staff on Thursday, I think, where we'll be discussing setting up a franchise where the private enterprise people like myself, I live on Davis Island, I would dearly love to own and operate and be sub-franchised by HART, my own jitney, okay? And I would buy services, I'd buy insurance, training, maintenance, everything I didn't want to do, I would buy from HART. And if we look at this very seriously, because it answers the question, how do you expand service and how do you make additional income? Now, if you have a better idea, we're wide open to listen to it. But that's one way of doing it, and it's really worth examining. How do you expand service? Okay. How do you get private enterprise involved? And how do you make money? And so the idea is to consolidate PSDA and make it in one metro system, bus system, like New York City, 5 boroughs, 1 bus system. We have 5 counties, 5 bus systems. We combine them, and even the sub-franchising gets better because the cost, the incremental cost becomes less. And that is something we should do. And I'll be back. Hopefully, that will find people that understand that. But remember, if you don't like sub-franchising, then what else? What other way can we increase service and make additional income from HART? If you have a better idea, we'd like to hear it. Thank you very much. You got a tough job, don't get me wrong. You're running a good service, but that's not good enough yet. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Phil Compton, next.
Good afternoon. Thanks for allowing the public to speak at this. Phil Compton, Regional Representative for Sierra Club. And by region, that means Tampa Bay. I'm one of the people, many people who lives in Tampa, currently works in St. Petersburg. And I've lived in Tampa for 38 years and have seen us do the same thing year after year. Build more roads, more roads, more roads. While we have a transit system that is designed really just to serve people who can't afford cars. And who is that? It costs us $9,000 a year to afford a car. So we are all stretched thin, those of us, people on the low income side of things, to afford a car. It's time for new choices here. I'm not speaking as for the position of the Sierra Club per se, but I do want to point out that 5 of our members, including 2 of our executive board members, are here with us today. And I want to thank them for being here. We're all wearing this little sticker that says, try transit. Because I think it's really time to do that. It's time to put forward a bold new vision, not just for the next 2 years, but for the next 30 years, that shows where we're going as a community. Your neighbors, you might have heard of this plan, have a vision, and on the other side, to the east, they have a vision of Polk County, of how they can serve the needs of their population. It involves coming to Tampa. You're the hub of this region. But you may, if we don't move forward, have the kind of transit deficit that hurts us economically, from the top of the towers in downtown to the lowest income housing that we have. We all need transit. One reason, not the top of your list, but one reason it's important for us, and we should not forget, are the children. 1 in 10 children have asthma. We have the worst air quality here in Hillsborough County, in the state of Florida. Every time someone has an opportunity to ride a bus, they're cutting their own personal contribution to that trip in half of the chemicals that produce smog. We had 3 days last month where the EPC issued advisories for air pollution, the type of air pollution that makes it hard for kids to breathe. It hurts them, burns the inside of their lungs. When these children with asthma are running around playing in the afternoon. So keep those children in mind, because even if those kids and their parents and their families never ride a bus, they'll be healthier because other people have an opportunity that they don't currently have because the bus doesn't run to their neighborhood, doesn't run late enough. We need a robust system that provides us all with new options to ride the bus early, often, and late. I love the Metro Rapid. I happen to be able to live close enough to walk and catch it. I would love to be able to see that running on weekends, in the evening. And I would love to see a lot of other folks in this town be able to ride that type of service as well, and have actual rapid bus transit that has its own dedicated lane. Because Metro Rapid is an express bus that's wonderful, it's not quite good enough. You know, for decades, since World War II, cities like ours have developed their own systems. And they've moved ahead of us. It's time for us to catch up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cotton. One other name is listed here, Eric Johnson from the county. I assume he is not going to be speaking publicly. He just signed the wrong paper, is what it is. That's right. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Is there anyone else that's a member of the public that would like to speak before us, before we get into our presentations? I see no one. Okay. Ms. Egan, Mr. Sandusky, I think you're going to be 2 folks that are giving us a presentation on the TDP vision plan.
We are. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Board. Marco and I are doing this from 2 locations, kind of tag teaming. In the interest of time, trying to give you the maximum time to talk. I will do the talking here because in handing it off, we lose time. And I am definitely the faster of the 2 speakers. You know your weaknesses, that's where we are. Separately, we are also using new software today. You've seen this information so many times. We wanted to give you a new way to think about the information we're sharing. And Marco is much better at doing the software than I am, so there we go. So let's get started, Marco. So what are we talking about today? You've got your Vision TDP plan. You have approved this as a board, but what is in that plan? What we wanted to do today was flesh out that plan, tell you what that buys, and then compare that back to the conversations you've been having on what is relevant, what is attractive. Get your thoughts, throw out some ideas from staff, and saying, here's what we have heard interest in, and pull together a bigger package, something which is bus intensive, but also goes beyond the bus, so the board can react to this and reflect as you discuss where you want the vision of the agency to be, where you want to see the agency going. So just to recap some of the numbers that, again, you see from us frequently, ridership's up and the budget is down. You see this a lot. We can give you a 5-year projection on this. We'll review of this. And then we also show you that supply on the street's been pretty constant and ridership is up. In the window on that slide, see how fast we're moving. Ridership's up 20% in 4 years, and miles on the street are actually down about 2%. You hear this from us a lot. How do we compare nationally? The slide was actually prepared by Dr. Colzine, but it shows that while nationally supply and demand on transit, we're tracking pretty close. HART supply is gone up minimally, that's the 10%, and the ridership return in 10 years is up 80%. So while we show you a lot that we're doing very, very good business here in Tampa, we're doing very well compared to the national average. But we'd like to stress that we believe that we deliver to our communities a great value. From a marketing perspective, you want to talk about product and placement, we are definitely placed where this product is being used. We have a great product for the market that it's in, but we're here in conversations to talk about market segmentation and looking into new markets. So let's just do a little snapshot, looking at some of our peer agencies, and a little aspirational too, of what are other areas spending per resident or per capita. And this is based on 2011 MTD data. 2012 data wasn't completed for every property by the time we put this together, but we can go back and refresh. So you see that we are comparable in investment, a little behind Orlando, comparable with Raleigh, but this is just the investment based on the funding that we have put together. And of course, more investment ends up being more service. This is how our transit supply scores up against some of our peer agency, and again, a little aspirational. So using that for the groundwork, let's talk about your transit plans, your TDP. It's a 10-year plan that we update every year. The state of Florida requires us to do so. And we hear that, not just from the community, but from board members, we should be more relevant, more attractive, move into new markets. We have not discussed with you what the vision plan really means, what that buys. So let's discuss if that is relevant and attractive. Things we focus on in transit investment: frequency, span, and territory, starting at the top. Once a route is out there, it's got to be frequent enough, maybe that you don't even need a schedule, but frequently enough that it matches your schedule and gets you where you need to go. Span is how much service we offer. Is it offered early enough for you to make a trip? For instance, that school kid who has to be on campus at 7 a.m., their bus starts running at 6 a.m., that's not going to work that day. Also more days of the week so you can live a complete schedule. Once we have good frequency and span, we look then to expand to new areas in our county so we can bring more area in for service, and then we go right back up to frequency, span, and move to Northern County. So the TDP consists of a few components. One is a status quo plan. The status quo plan is built on current funding. This presumes a 3% increase in ad valorem each year. Obviously, we come back and modify this based on what we're seeing. It assumes our federal formula stays pretty constant, and we expect that to be the case because we do not see our population growing or shrinking wildly. It also assumes a current level of involvement on state grants, and we factor in the fair revenue we have. So the status quo plan has modest increases in service. We put together a vision plan also. And how did we come up with our vision plan? It was a doubling of transit service within the county. Now what does that mean? This builds all the Metro Rapid corridors, which we've discussed with you, so Dale Mabry, Kennedy, Bush and Gun Highway, also going out to New Tampa and State Route 60. This would take most routes to 10 p.m. Most routes would run 7 days a week. Certain routes would run around the clock, which is great for those later shifts. This also adds Plant City to the mix. When you come down to cost, this adds a new bus garage and a new van garage. Overall cost of the TDP in 10 years on the vision plan is an additional $400 million in capital. Additional means on top of what we're getting from the federal formula. By 2020, we expect that all to be going to capital. So this is not just expense, this is what we already got from federal coming out of that. It's an additional $268 million over 10 years just for service. That backs out fair revenue. We have not modified the state grant projections in that budget, but again, it already takes into account federal formula and it takes into account fares. So when we say it's an additional $268 million in a 10-year window, and at the end of the 10 years, it's an additional $54 million a year to operate, that is a true number. It's not 54 minus fares minus this, that, the other. So the vision plan would essentially take our operating budget to $150 million a year, and again, a double service. And here's what that actually looks like for our county. On this map in beige is our service area. This is 3/4 of a mile from our fixed route. We define our service area this way because that's what the ADA uses, and this is what we report to the feds. 3/4 of a mile is probably a 15 to 20 minute walk. And when it gets warmer, it's rainy, folks won't do that. So we also look in this area and we say, what's within a 1/4 mile? A 5-minute walk is reasonable. Based on our NPO data, right now, about 67% of the population is in 3/4 of a mile of the bus route. Again, that's a long walk, so within 5 minutes, about 40% of the population of the county can get to a bus route. 62% of jobs are within 5 minutes of a bus route. Again, on this, we're not slicing and dicing what time of day, we're just saying what is approximate. The vision plan in 2025 will buy you the same thing. So with so much growth going on in our county, even doubling transit, even putting $268 million in service, adding all this capital, we will not be covering more jobs and we will not be covering more of the population. Another way to think about this is our status quo plan will end up being a market loss for us, and that's what we're structured to be able to afford. So as we talk to you about what's relevant and what's attractive, we default back to the vision plan. But we don't think we're hearing from you, and definitely not from our groups and community meetings, that relevant and attractive is where we are. And make no mistake, let's look at this map. Everything in color is new or expanded service under the vision plan. The fuzzy ones are new, and the actual sharp lines are expanded service. The vision plan is not an insignificant investment, and it takes this much investment to keep our footprint in the county safe. So again, we'd like to stress we are a fantastic value. We're delivering great return for the product that we're getting out there. We have saturated our market, and we do not hear from folks that we are a bad product. The issue becomes, what about moving into a new market? What about going beyond the needs of just our riders and the needs to our community? Bearing in mind that many different markets have different needs, different neighborhoods, different parts of our county have different needs. How do we plan to meet them? What would we give to this board to consider as some options to become more relevant and be more attractive? What are smart ways to grow? And what are some of our new markets? And Commissioner Merman, my apologies, it was really easy to find a picture of a guy in a tie on a bus.
But no women in heels?
We could not find them. Not that we're suitable for this presentation. We will keep looking. We also talk about millennials. They engage with transit and transportation differently. They're more likely to use transit, but they are a lot pickier. We have parts of our county which are of a median age, and they're not riding with us. This is another market. You know, just folks who are not riding us today, what are these markets and how do we reach them? How do we move to the next market and segment out? How do we create our sense of excitement? How do we move on to these new needs? And it's not just service, we have to think beyond the bus too. What are some things going on now that folks are excited about? We've got one bus away. Folks know on their handhold when the bus is showing up. We have RFIs and RFPs out there now for new integrated services. We'll come back and talk to you. And we do think we're special, but we are not unique. There's a lot of great stuff going on in the state. There is a lot of interest at Peak Airport of approaching transit and transportation differently. People are talking about what's going on out of Tampa International. Folks are talking about managed lanes. We are projected here within 10 years, but going on every day down in Miami. This is something which is interesting. We also hear about all over Florida, potential for private entities to come in and partner and deliver service, maximizing everyone's investment through a partnership. So when we're talking about more relevant, more attractive, we think you are asking us to talk about more frequent bus service. We can run service, we can plan for service that's 10 minutes on our major route, that's the busiest routes in rush hour. We would recommend that as a minimum. We would recommend looking at 15-minute frequency on other local routes. We would recommend our HART-like services having 2 vans so they can run half-hourly instead of hourly on those services. We'd recommend additional circulators out of Riverview, Gibsonton, Davis Island. We'd also recommend circulators plugging into more robust bus rapid transit. We'd recommend talking about circulators coming into intermodal facilities, not just in West Shore and downtown, but in Southampton and Brampton also. We would recommend that you ask us to look at some of these ideas more thoroughly. Our commuter expresses is put together in the vision plan are 8 trips in the morning and 8 trips at night. But for that discretionary commuter, how long will they wait at that park and ride before they get back in their car? We would propose every 15 minutes in a 3-hour peak frequency, and greater frequency if it was necessary on some of these routes. I mean, for big vision, we can look wide, but this is what's necessary to carry folks significantly and get them off the road. Also, more customer-focused improvements. We stress more because we're really committed to a lot of it. Because again, half of our passengers now already get off and on and stop at the shelter. And other amenities we put out there have been very customer-driven. But basic things such as improved lighting at bus stops so folks feel safer waiting. For the folks not boarding and alighting at shelters and not close to a street light, what can we do at their stops? Bike shares coming to Tampa, we'd love to have it integrated in NTC and in the Google Apps. So when somebody comes in to plan their trip, they can go from bus to bike and it's a seamless experience for them. We've talked to you about mobile ticketing. The second image here is someone who's actually paying with their phone, which we'd love to get to, and the millennials would love to do that with us. The third screen is from TriMet, and the final, over to the side we see all the dots. TriMet has such frequent service, they don't give you one bus away. They show you where all the buses are, and then you can figure out what's the best connection for you to walk to. That would require technology, it also requires frequency to support it. The fourth image where the gentleman is tapping on the phone, that's a bundled package where somebody can buy a ticket to go to a hockey game and get their bus pass at the same time. These are opportunities which are out there, and we would recommend the board let's consider this too, these technology-driven and infrastructure-driven improvements. We would also like to get more parking rides out there. More parking rides mean we can focus our express service, have shorter trips, make more of them, and it opens up the door for vendor opportunities. You will hear me say that if you put a dry cleaner, a daycare, and a coffee shop, people will go there all day long, and it is true. It can be a good revenue source for the entity to get rents back, but it also is an amenity for our passengers and makes our life easier. Bus rapid transit in the bus-only lane. Our TDP vision plan includes Metro Rapid, and thank you, Mr. Compton, we're fans of it too, but we are stuck in the same traffic as everybody else. And the first 2 images are from Cleveland. This is the Helpline BRT line. The first image is the standalone corridor with the improved median and the vehicle. Incidentally, the vehicle is branded for the 2 hospitals on the line. They paid $25 million for 10 years of naming rights, with the caveat that 10% of the naming right money gets invested back into the corridor for landscaping. Great deal for all parties. The second photo is downtown Cleveland, and I know people say, what, downtown Cleveland? They've done a great job in renovations, and a lot of it has been built around their Healthline corridor. So just not what you would expect in Cleveland. So there are opportunities to get out there. This is not cheap. Full bus rapid transit in New York from $25 to $50 million a mile. And the main reason behind that is the right-of-way provision. Compares favorably to putting out or going back and repaving a facility. Again, it is not cheap, but it does generate this type of permanent investment that is anchored around it. The big red slide is Curitiba, Brazil, which started it all. That funky looking tube is where you pay your fare and get into the tube, get directly onto the BRT corridor. And then public-private partnerships. Just because it's not a 40-foot bus doesn't mean it shouldn't tie into our network. And just because it's not a 40-foot bus does not mean HART should work on that solution. You see a couple of images here. The top image is iGo car sharing. It's a neighborhood-driven car solution, completely supported by neighborhoods in Chicago. It's $250 a month to pay for parking, for $30 a month to pay the iGo. A lot of folks do that. And they do a lot of transit, but they have this network that ties into their train stations. And we've got images. The second image on the top row is from the Miami Intermodal Center, which we've been hearing a lot. Immediately underneath that is Anaheim for an intermodal center. We see the Google Bus, which is a completely private transportation system in Silicon Valley, meeting the needs of the transit agency. It's not in their market to do this, but they work nicely with the vendor that it makes sense for that vendor. And then we have a video, don't we, Marco? We'd like to stress on this video, we are not doing business with this entity. They may apply on an RFI that we have out on the street, but this is a great example of some first mile, last mile stuff which can be transit oriented. We'd also like to stress it's a fixed rate, it's a fixed fare, so there's not a meter in this particular example.
Building lights traffic. What's the impact on our quality of life? We know transit is a better solution, but how can we really make it work for all of us? It's a fact that if more of us could get to transit within 15 minutes, we would likely use it. That's about a half-mile walk. There's just no way to build enough stations to allow access. Introducing MetroB, following nature's example, and getting us to mass transit. These don't work alone. They work together. MetroB transits simulate a colony and serve a bigger area. With mathematics, smartphones, and shared vehicles, we create a swarm ready to provide a ride to the nearest station. That's your HART. Ooh, with MetroB, we get you to and from transit within 15 minutes for a few bucks. Pretty cool, huh? So enter your destination on the MetroB app. Instantly a ride is sent to you. On the way, you relax and enjoy a simpler way of getting around. Say yes, please, to MetroB. We are ready to go in Oakland and the East Bay first.
So again, just an example of one of several private entities out there doing the first mile, last mile transit information for us. And again, HART has an RFI on the street out to vendors to see, hey, what kind of information do they need from us? What kind of interest do they have in coming here to provide this type of service? And finally, some of these private partnerships are things which are easy to map. We hear from our friends in South County, they want to go to the airport. It does not make sense with our business model to run a bus from South County to the airport. But that does not mean that we can't talk about working with a charter provider and underwriting the cost of a ticket or doing a subsidized fare. So folks who want to get there have a way, and we can continue to focus on our core business. Just like transporting folks to major employers or running shuttles to the airport from any part of town. Might not be the thing we always do, but we can do it, we can get out there. It's a transit need that we can fulfill. Now, the reason we've got this in a circle is to show where we are, and that's in the top left-hand corner. That's where we are with our TDP. We have great service, it's basic service. We put money back in the bank every year. We're living within our budget and we're getting even more service out on the street. We're very proud of our investment. But we know that our county and our communities would like us to see us do more, and we'd like to be able to offer more. With the board's approval or pending your pleasure, we would obviously start with a robust public involvement campaign. Commissioner Herman asked us earlier this year how much a big program would cost. We would recommend a series of 3 meetings in at least 15 separate neighborhoods, so we can really make sure that what we think is what folks are looking for. We don't have a marketing contractor, so we'd have to go out to bid on that one. But we would start with a public involvement campaign, see what people want, and come back with a plan we can meet those needs. We can tell you, though, what some prices look like. So again, our operating budget right now is $65 million. The TDP vision plan is about $115 million operating. A big, robust plan. Let's say you have dedicated BRT on Dale, Mabry, and Kennedy. Let's say we do have 15-minute frequency on most routes, 10-minute frequency in rush hour. We're looking at this whole package, expanded express services, etc. That would be about a $300 million annual operating budget. And this would include a 658 vehicle fleet, so we have 3 garages with 1 van garage. And this is about $1 billion of capital, not a small number, separate from vehicles. Yes, ma'am.
Can I just clarify, is this, you're talking something now beyond the vision plan?
Yes, ma'am. We can scope as broadly or as narrowly as the board sees fit, but we figured it was easier to start big and say, oh my goodness, and back into what we wanted to focus on, than it was to say, sure, you've been hearing from us for the past several months, sure we can say that, sure we can do that. We wanted to put that out there for your consideration and your discussion, so that you would be able to say, where do you want to go, and we would have provided you information, and have more costing, if anybody's interested in the course of the conversation.
Can you back up?
Yes, ma'am.
I missed that.
Yes.
Statistic.
Sure, $303 million for operating, and that's a ballpark in today's numbers. 658 vehicles in the fleet. The capital cost of physical infrastructure, so that's parking rides, 6 parking rides, 2 multimodal facilities, 2 full BRT corridors, the other Metro Rapid corridors is about $1 billion and 340 million in vehicles. And those nice, robust BRT corridors would include the nice, robust BRT vehicles, all CNG, of course.
Hang on a second, before we go, let's make sure that now when we're discussing this, and I'm going to try and get everybody around of doing it, whoever has not spoken gets the first shot at it, okay? So we're going to start with you, Mr. Beckner, and then we're going to go around and make sure everyone has their questions answered. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So for the people listening, Kevin, can you explain the vision plan by increasing operating by 54 million, and what was the capital in the vision?
The capital for the 10-year vision plan was an additional $400 billion. And that included a bus garage, a van.
Sorry, 400
400 million, sorry, wrong letter. Can we have another show? I suddenly worked for the U.S. government. Yes, sir.
So I think what might be helpful, if you could start delineating within the vision plan, what do we get for 54 million and 400 million in capital? How more does our fleet expand, and kind of what do we get?
Marco's going to take us back to the map, and we will, later this week, we'll get you out the ridership projections we have for that and the fleet size, the actual impact of our service area. This is what we would have at the end of 10 years.
So how big would our fleet be?
Fleet probably with this scenario goes to just under 400 vehicles, but I don't have the numbers with me. So between 300 and 400 vehicles. By adding this, each garage can handle up to about 200 to 250. So the vision plan will include anywhere from 300 to 400 vehicles.
Can you delineate out, get that out to us, what the vision plan would look like, and then ultimately then compare it, what would the maximum, so what I'm looking to have is like a choice menu. If we stay with what we had today, this is what we get. If we go to the vision plan, this is what you order. You know, it's kind of like, you know, do the regular size, do the biggie size, and super size.
Well, we did give you a supersized presentation, so there you go. Yes, sir, we'll do that.
And then that way we can start having real conversations. And then obviously behind that, then you start talking about the options for financing. And so I don't even know what we would need to do to finance, $1 billion in additional capital and that type of operating. Great, thank you.
Mr. Milano.
Catherine, thank you for a great presentation, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. To play off Commissioner Beckner's comments, and what I had in mind, just a couple quick notes, is kind of the status quo, and then the vision plan, and then kind of a vision plan, a wish list and a bigger wish list. So I really like the idea of having a menu, kind of what we're getting, and then what it costs in a clear document. Because, and I just want to make one more comment, I'll let other folks speak. I think if we go out and we outreach to the public, we not only need to find out what they want, but we need to inform them of what's on the menu. I think that they need, before they come and kind of say, oh, I would love to have this. They need to know what's realistic, what we can get, and what it costs, and what's out there. So I think providing that menu to them prior to getting comments from the public in some way, I think would be very important. Thanks.
Thanks. Anyone else? Thanks. That's yours.
Yeah. I was just wondering, I had asked at the Finance Committee meeting that maybe we look at kind of a longer term, because once we start putting these Metro Rapids on the street, every 12 years we're going to have an additional recurring capital cost. So the 400 million in capital, is that just the non-recurring capital, or can you kind of see, what it's going to look like maybe 15 years down the line when we have to come back for capital for some of these new services?
Thank you. Most of Jeff and his group are actually in a row, and I'm giving the SNS training this week, but he's still working on the 20-year snapshot. I'm going to show you the TDP vision plan 20 years out. But the $400 million is to make a 10-year vision plan happen. And even if we accelerate it, the $400 million, we would back out some vehicles, but the actual physical infrastructure cost would still be there. But we will get to that 20-year level.
And I was writing really fast when you were going through the presentation. So we had the 400 million in capital, the 268 million over the 10-year period for operating. The 110 to 115, was that our current service plus what the vision?
That would be inclusive. So we're 65 million now. If we woke up tomorrow and we were running the vision plan, so our current dollars, all things being equal, we'd be between 110 and 115. If we went to the big, everything here, everything in the kitchen sink, really fantastic, that could be up to 300 million.
And does, the map is kind of small here, I think you said it does, but the vision plan would include like circulators in South County?
It does, we'll actually, we'll email the presentation to you with a separate JPEG of the map, which will be easier to see.
It's hard to read the legend, that's all.
It is hard to read the legend, and this is our first test drive with these maps, so you will see it on there. There are some yellow dashed ones that don't appear very well. Those are existing flex zones. We still have some revisions to improve for this, but that does include new circulators and new flex zones, yes.
And then just one more, just a point of clarification. So the 6 Metro Rapids would all be shared lanes, not be exclusive.
Correct, it would be just like Metro Rapid today.
You alluded to the huge cost differential the other way. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is this map for the proposed expansion include what the NPO did for South County?
Yes, it has a South County circulator plan in it.
It doesn't look similar, but maybe because it's first up.
It is in the haze of the background, but it does include the finance of the South County circulators.
Okay, I want to ask this question and not stir up any controversy, but there's an assumption here that you're going to own all the increased ridership for many years down the road. And let me just qualify that. If there is development of future transit options, as you know, the Expressway Authority wants to run the managed lanes with the bus toll on it. And I think what I'm getting at is that as things are developed in this community, what we're going to be doing is developing new riders, hopefully, but also some riders may transfer from HART over to more express bus options. So, if I'm making sense, if the assumption is that you're always going to own all the ridership, I guess this picture is good if you're going to take into account some of the risk factors that may be down the pike, so to speak. You probably wouldn't own all the ridership. So what would, I guess, and then in relation to Commissioner Beckner's comments, I guess if you lost ridership because it transferred to another mode, what would be the plan from there? I mean, if you've got all this increased financing and you've made all these investments, what would happen? I'm just saying there is some risk here because we don't know exactly what the other transit options will be in our county. But are you assuming that you're going to own the bus toll and the managed lanes and Metro Rapid and all that?
For the purposes of putting together the bus service, we presume that the bus service would fall under the county's transportation agency, which is HART. So separate from the lane itself, the bus, with the folks riding actually on the bus, we would presume that. But if the tollway is running a separate entity that has a bus service that's out there that's running on there, we would absolutely love to see more service getting out.
Okay, so the assumption includes going over to the new agency.
Well, the assumption would be if there's a toll lane out there, unless the toll authority is going and hiring a fleet, putting out a new set of buses on it. In the conversations we've had with them, all the conversations have been that a HART bus is operating on their facility.
I see. Okay.
Thanks, Commissioner. Staff?
Yeah, I'd just like clarification on the comments that Ms. Egan made about going out for,
Hit your microphone. There you go.
some clarification on the comments about going out for public reaction. Are we planning to do this soon? Are we planning to do it in the fall? When would this 15 neighborhood conversation begin?
The conversation ideally would start where the board gives us direction to go. From a planning perspective, our staff preference would be to have meetings in the fall and to avoid the holidays and to avoid the summer. At least for the HART meetings, we see much better attendance in September, October. We see good attendance up here about the middle of November. And we see better attendance starting up about mid-January through sometime in May, depending on where spring break and summer vacation are falling. But again, that's based on our experience. Our partners who have worked on different projects, they have good turnout on the summer stuff. We do not have an item budgeted right now for outreach because it's not something which has been called for by the board. We have looked into cost, but we don't have it set as a separate item. If, however, it's a pleasure of the board for us to proceed in that direction, we can come back to you in that area.
Well, the reason I bring this up, just so that we're all on the same track, if there is going to be more discussion, as is on the second part of our agenda, about change in the formatting, the governance, the operation of this organization, I would think we would want to hold just one set of public hearings out there to test not only these service levels, but if there's going to be other things put out in the referendum or are being perhaps planned to be included in the referendum, we would want to go out to the public with as clear a picture as we could of what is being discussed. That's why I was interested in knowing how soon you were planning these 15 neighborhood meetings. That's just something we need to put on the sideline for further discussion.
Anyone else before I go with Ms. Moran?
Well, I was going to respond to her question.
Well, I was going to suggest, and I may be wrong, but the TDP is something that's developed, all the time, so that is something we have to report publicly, typically, anyway, correct? And I think what your question was about some of the other things that we may have to do based on that TDP, whatever our vision is going to be. Am I correct?
I just think that we ought to try to be as clear as we can with the public. So if there is going to be an onward progression of changing this agency in a major way, it will also change the service that's offered. We would want to go out to the public in a very positive way with one program for them to try to assess, not a HART program and then 4 months later, whatever the next entity is called. That's my answer.
That we do have, from the policy group, we do have extensive public outreach and community meetings planned throughout the summer. And it would be great if it's all coordinated together. So that we only go out once. Otherwise, I'm not sure what, people sometimes attend or don't attend, but they're not going to attend twice if they think it's the same subject.
Before I go to Commissioner Beckner, is there anyone else that wants to make a comment that hasn't yet? Mr. Posey, and then, thank you.
Yeah, just some general comments. The base TDP plan that we've been basically functioning under, it's important to remember that this was developed in the midst of a recession, initially in the shadow of a failed referendum, and it was, explicitly modest, living within our means. It certainly doesn't reflect that the board, the ridership community, and the significant share of the rest of the community has aspirations for considerably better transit service than is available in the community at this point in time. And if you look at our vision plan, it's interesting, we kind of blew past that and said, well, this is a doubling of service. Well, as an example, the green light proposal is a 65% increase in service. For Pinellas, this is a doubling of service. That is a huge increase in service by historic metrics for the industry. And a number of places have, with major initiatives, have done, significant bumps in service. But in practical terms, they almost always end up to be a much more modest ramp up just from practical, as well as market building experience. You simply don't have a huge latent demand. The other dilemma or challenge that folks have is any transit professional can spec in a service that's very attractive. It's just that it's not a service that the public can afford, and it's frankly not a service that provides the benefits that we hope for from public transportation. As it turns out, empty buses don't save energy, they don't keep the air clean, they're not a good use of resources, etc. And the challenge is expanding service, but expanding service at a level of utilization that makes it prudent to expect the public to be willing to pay for it. There's a number of places. I was in Dallas after their referendum. They approximately doubled service, and a year later they started winding that service back in because of the fallout from empty buses and high costs and et cetera, et cetera. So the practical strategy is ramping up service, but doing it in the context of an understanding of where there's the market size to make that service be a prudent investment. There was some discussion of some of the tactics and strategies and coverage issues, and there's kind of a default to fixed route. But for example, as we talk about things like buses operating in express lanes, park and ride becomes a very significant factor in serving from dispersed locations into the system. That's what lets you aggregate enough people to fill up a bus to make it productive to provide a bus service. Certain things like flex services, van pool, carpool programs, etc. Those all need to be part of the package so that everybody's served with mobility options, be they fixed route or otherwise. So I think that's something to keep in mind. The other thing I would caution a little bit on public outreach and expectations. A couple things. Almost anybody, when they get surveyed, the feedback you get, you refer to as stated preference. This is what people say they want, but as any good survey will tell you, people's actual behavior doesn't necessarily match their stated preferences. And the industry has spent decades learning how people really behave and how they respond to certain investments, and forecasting and modeling how people will react to services, and that piece of the equation can't be lost either. It's easy to get people excited and to want lots of things, but when there's no price tags on those things, or they're not based on the reality of, well, gee, that was fun, but I realized I couldn't do X, Y, and Z. So I would encourage all of the folks doing transportation planning to rely on the professionals and the experiences that have been learned in lots of communities across the country that have moved into these things and successfully expanded and improved their services. It's not just aspirational. It needs to be bounded in both financial reality and behavioral reality.
Okay, Commissioner Sharp, then Commissioner, very patient, Beckner. Anyone else after Commissioner Beckner would like to go? We'll go with Mr. Sharp, sir.
The chart that looks at
I didn't catch off your microphone, Mark.
I paid for the microphone.
You got press conference over here now.
The chart that looks at total annual operating expenditures per resident has us, you said, I look at this, it looks like we're kind of at the bottom end. Atlanta seems to be at the top, followed by Dallas and Portland, Charlotte, Jacksonville, Austin, Salt Lake City, and then right to the right of it, the annual service miles per resident, like something similar. We kind of, we're tied with Raleigh, Durham, apparently, with the vitamin. Would we be able to make up the difference with the vision plan?
We can go back and look at the data for the slides and run them again as the vision plan was put together and see how that stacks up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm, naturally, I like the bold plan. Have we named the other plan yet? Did we give it a name?
The March plan.
March.
The Sharper plan.
I wasn't lobbying for that. I'll take it.
We'll get a name of the park and ride after you.
Got another bull watch. So, and I appreciate, and I would like to see the breakdown Commissioner Beckner requested, which is kind of showing capital expenditures, not fleet vehicles and such, but I'm also interested in between the SHARP plan, the vision plan, and then the status quo plan. I'd like to see the breakdown as well. But I kind of drilling down to where Dr. Paulzine was heading, and then looking as well at transit performance, which it seems that we've always kind of, as of 2005, we've been trending ahead of national ridership. Is that correct? Pretty significantly. And that's capturing, as was indicated by one of our presenters, predominantly, again, the market share where the riders don't have much alternative. Not the choice rider, someone who could drive a car, but perhaps doesn't have a bus stop within walking distance. So what I'd like to see is how, whether it's the vision plan or the third plan, that expenditure would grow our market share. And would that third plan get us into a competitive position vis-a-vis the other regions we've compared ourselves with, or could we accomplish that with the vision plan? What plan, vision plan or the third plan, would get us in competition? And then another question I would have is just the breakdown of a half cent or a penny. If we were to go with a sales tax, which would capture far more revenue, obviously, than ad valorem. We could switchers out. I would prefer to switch it out. Sales tax for the ad valorem, so we could zero the ad valorem out and then capture revenue from visitors and others. But I'd like to see how a half cent and a full cent, would we be able to accomplish the vision plan with a half cent or a full cent? Would we be able to accomplish the Boulder plan? I guess we'd have to bond with the half cent, or would we need the full cent?
For the vision plan, we do have ridership projections already prepared for the big circle of a whole bunch of services which are out there. And we'll call it the SHARP plan. Because it's not, unfortunately, though, it's not a fully pulled together plan. We were trying to make sure we gave you guys options to talk about today. To say, here's everything that's out there, and we can go to 10-minute frequency, but you end up taking the budget up by a factor of 5. So we can do these things. We'll pull together as much information as we have, but it will be difficult to into a lot of industry standard information on if you look at this type of improvement. You might see this kind of increase, but we can assemble costs.
And one thing that would be very important for me, I think back when my very first job, I was explaining to my son who's turned 18, the importance of having a job. And we were talking about, and he was like talking about why it should be something relevant to what he's into in the future. I said, look, I was a delivered furniture, my first job, while in high school. And I would see the people come into the furniture store really excited and buying up a lot of furniture. And occasionally, and I remember one instance, like it was yesterday, going into the person's home and the furniture didn't fit. I mean, it was Lyft, Metro B, whomever else is out there or wants to be there, helping us out and engage. But I just want to make sure that what we have is something that fits the design, the layout of our region. So that we aren't looking back and going, well, why do we, because then I can tell you, if it doesn't work, it will be called the SHART plan, so. But I'm feeling bold with this, let's go bold.
Thank you, sir. That's a lot of caffeine in your system. Mr. Beckman.
Thank you. Kind of working back, I think that goes to the point that Dr. Paulzine made, is that when you come up with this menu, I think there definitely needs to be price tags attached, and not just of what it's going to cost operationally to the agency or capital-wise to the agency, but I think it needs to be broken down to what it's going to cost the end user, the consumer. So whether we're in ad valorem or sales tax, people need to know what it's going to cost in their pocketbook, because if every option we have on there has a price attached to it, then people can associate a value with that service, and if that's something they're willing to pay for. It's kind of like going into the restaurant. We might go to a really nice restaurant having lobster in our mind, we want to have caviar with that, we want to have the soup du jour and everything else. When you start looking at the menu price, maybe your appetite starts changing just a little bit. And so what they also have to say, you have to ask the price on some of those items maybe you ought not be in that restaurant. But we are in the public service business, so maybe being able to associate prices with that from a consumer level, and if we put a menu out there, and then maybe we provide the whole different menu options, and then allow people to, by survey, scratch off things that they don't feel is a wise investment, and perhaps that's a way that we can get feedback. And then going on to feedback, I think what we ultimately absolutely have to do as an agency, as a HART board as we are now, decide what is the plan that we want to propose to put out there for public consideration. But before we do that, we absolutely cannot go out as the HART agency and then have the staff going out as a transportation policy group, start talking about two different plans, because then we're reliving 2010 where you've got multiple groups talking about different transportation plans and everybody's getting confused again. So our plan that we come up here has to overlay and coordinate with the work that's being done by the policy group. Even though there's a larger percentage of people that sit here on the policy group, we have to go out as one agency. And I would suggest that time when we go out, it'd be the redeveloped HART agency, and that we speak as one agency on what we're going to propose and recommend. We cannot go out with under different agency names with different types of proposals that go out there. So I would guess, from what I understand from the policy group, that we should have those plans kind of developed by towards the end of the summer. So then we need to make decisions as the policy group and then as a HART board and merge those into the plans that we're going to bring out to public.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Melendez, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask Mr. Burr and then Mr. Vance to go before you and then you. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to hear the direction of this conversation, because one of the concerns I had coming in here, especially as I heard comments about public outreach, was having reviewed even the survey instrument that's been put out by the the Transportation Policy Committee. I did not get the sense from that survey instrument that they were asking the questions of dollars and cents. That it felt very much like some of the polling that may have been done prior to the 2010 referendum that asked benign but large conversations about, do we want to increase our transportation options? And of course, who's going to say no to that? But yet when the question does come down to real taxes that are going to be voted on, the public, when they're confronted with that question, has a very different answer. So I'm encouraged by the discussion here that there's a cost component that would be very much a part of any community outreach. And I also caution that community outreach can be meetings scattered around the county. Community outreach can bring in the STPs, as it were, the same 10 people. But whatever research is being done ought to be scientifically valid. And I would point to, and I don't know all the details, but I would point to the post-election diagnostics done by the NPO, where they reached out and did focus groups and quantitative research to back it up, as opposed to, well, yeah, we had meetings around the county, and those who showed up told us they wanted this, that, and the other. A clear and focused effort to really get at what the public information, what the public data is. It may be different than that sort of, well, we've had a bunch of rah-rah sessions. So that's really all I have to say on this one. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Vance.
Thank you. I would be curious to know how the peer groups were chosen. Are they compared by demographics? What demographics are included? Is it the size of the locality? Is it the population base and such? With that, though, I'd also like to know the allocation of resources that each of these other cities has. Would we have access to that? Sales tax versus ad valorem and such, and the percentages of that, of their total income. Thank you.
Let me answer that because it refers to the slides that were developed by Cutter. Just for full disclosure, I'm doing some work for the county through Cutter to support their policy leadership group, and it included developing some of the state on peer cities. The specific peer cities that we cited were based on a group that have similar characteristics in terms of transit use, but it also included the group of cities that the Tampa Bay Partnership considers peers for economic development purposes. And then a few others that I added Portland because it's an iconic transit-rich city that's often used in comparison data. And then, like I said, and the others were references the county staff made to areas that they felt are our competitors when it comes to economic development. One could certainly come up with more cities than these if they wanted to, and there is a host of additional data for all of these cities on things like roadway capacity and safety and social demographics and other things that's readily available. I can provide it to the staff.
Mr. Mullins?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one detailed comment on our direction to Ms. Egan on the menu. And going back to that analogy, I think it's a great analogy. When the bill comes and you're going to pay, I think it's wonderful. Again, the direction of the dialogue, I think, is tremendous, even since I began my appointment. And the extent to which we're talking about involving private entities and charters and things, I think it's a great conversation. So playing off that, I think that whether it's just a qualitative kind of representation, I think that when we present information to the public and also for our own benefit, it would be good to have, when the options are presented, the somehow characterize or indicate the private potential. Meaning, yes, taxes are the traditional means of funding and grants and things, but I think exploring how privatizing portions of the SHART plan, of the vision plan, and those things, what those opportunities are, I think would be really, really key to communicating the full picture of what we're talking about in that main document.
Commissioner Becker?
Speaking on coordination, and I'm thinking about it, Catherine, as the HART staff as it exists now, we had the conversations with the Transportation Policy Group, with the presentations that we have been receiving. I've heard that you all have been in conversation, but are our plans, vision plans, and all of our accelerated plans being overlapped with the work that they are doing?
Yes, absolutely. The county has, work group has been working with the TDP vision plan. If we were to look at anything other than what the board has voted on, which is of course the vision plan, you would need to see it first. So that's another reason to have this conversation today. When we come to the policy group on the 25th of June, we will be focusing on what's in the vision plan. We will include items from here saying these things are possible, here are the price tags, but we will be stressing that the vision plan is what has been adopted by the HART boards, where the agency's going, what transit is for the county.
So we would have to approve, then the third, we would still have to vote on approve as this board, the higher end plan.
If there were to be a separate plan that the board wanted to take action on and direct staff to present, in 2 weeks and 2 days, staff would probably have a heart attack. But we are ambitious. We've been working very closely with the county. They have all our data, and we share emails at 10 p.m. We share emails at 2 a.m. We work very closely with the county.
Well, I'm just wondering if we, if this board is really wants to go into the higher end, maybe that we have that as another option, and what those additions would be to the vision plan, perhaps. I don't know. But we're starting to get into some decision making time. They're going to need to know if this board is going to add a second option other than the vision plan.
Okay. If anyone else want to speak now, and then I'll make some comments if
let folks begin.
Just a general comment on the context of plans and vision and long range, et cetera. I was actively involved in the committee in 1999 that looked for more investment in transportation in this community, including public transportation. And I was involved in making the recommendations to the commission then. I served in the Transportation Task Force about, 6 years ago now. And again, same issue, we're underspending relative to peers. We need better transit, we need better roads, we need better mobility. And I've certainly been engaged in this. But I'm to the point where I'm less worried about what the vision's going to look like in 20 years and more worried about how we're going to buy new buses in 2 years. And we're at a point now in transportation planning where we're looking at far and away the greatest uncertainty in terms of the future that's existed in the last half century or so. Demographics are changing rapidly, technology is changing rapidly, government finance, funding, the economy, etc. And we're not necessarily going to know, for example, what transit technology choices we're going to have in 10 or 20 years and what personal travel choices we're going to have and how much we're going to be doing by communication instead of travel, etc. But we do know that for the foreseeable future we need better service. And I hope that we don't let uncertainty about an ultimate vision get in the way of keeping up the momentum of making progress now. Because one of the things that it's obviously harder to corral everybody's perspective on the long-range future, but I don't want us to trip up doing anything for as we seek some shared long-range vision. We need new buses. We need to expand service. We've got some standing room only crowds. Future leaders can modify, tweak, amend, enhance, etc. As they see fit. But I think our critical need right now is to make some progress in the near term, incrementally, and move ahead and have an agency that can respond to the dynamics that we see in the future.
Ms. Davis, Mr. Sharp.
Just one additional comment. I would hope that whatever we take to the policy group in June would very clearly show costs. Because, again, it's my concern that the public understand what we're doing. It's my concern that the public understand what might be proposed for the future and where it might lead them. And I think if you're talking ½ cent or 1 cent, the real point is to the public, how much does that buy for them? Right. If you're going to add roads into this discussion, then the public needs to know of this possible 1 cent total pot of money. How much is going to go to transit? How much is going to go to the esoteric stuff? And how much is going to go to roads and bridges? And I think unless we put clear numbers against the plan that we take to the county discussions, that's going to get lost. And I think it's very important we be very candid, everybody be candid with the public about the dollar amounts.
Great. Mr. Sharp, anyone after Mr. Sharp before I take some comments? Mr. Sharp.
When you're referencing dollar amounts, Director Gadry, are you talking about the total amount that we're looking at spending and the cost to each individual taxpayer? Or are you talking about the division between roads and
I'm talking about the whole thing, Commissioner Sharp, starting with the small numbers which grow into the big numbers. What it would take to fulfill our vision, just our plain vision, and how much of a 1% or ½ % would fund that. And if it's going to be a combined plan, how much of transit improvements with that fund? Because I think there's a real concern, and you can hear it in the people who have already come in front of us. I think there's a real concern about how transit is going to fare versus how some other needs are going to fare. And I certainly don't have the answer to that right now, but I think we're going to be very candid and very consistent with the public in the numbers we give.
Well, I absolutely agree. So however we can provide that information, we should. You know, I always love, I really do appreciate Dr. Paulson probably thinks I like to argue with him, I do. But I also enjoy the conversation back and forth. I agree that we have to focus on the here and now, but other communities 20 years back looked out ahead and knew that 20 years was a long time, that they went ahead and made that investment. And those are the communities which are ahead of us. And we're always the one hanging back with the uncertainties. I mean, I think the only thing you left out was El Nino. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainties out there. We don't know what's going to happen, but we have to recognize that there's always uncertainty. To those 20 years behind or 40 years behind, those coming right out of the Second World War, they were wearing uncertainty on their shoulder, but they moved forward. I think when you talk about the cost to the ratepayer, that's true. We talked in 2010, the average cost of a full cent, approximately $110, maybe a little bit more. I don't know, between 80 and 110 for an individual, somewhere in the 120 range for a family, which is about 2 full tanks of gasoline. And that was $120 per person per year. So it's relative. And then my final point is those communities that have took that step, all interestingly enough, do have median incomes much higher than ours. So we might make the investment in transit, and I don't think we can make a direct correlation necessarily between the investment in transit and roads, and I'm a support roads as well, and median income. But it's interesting that those communities which have made that investment have significantly higher median incomes than ours. And so maybe we'll find over time, it won't happen right away, but that we'll see incomes going up as the type of companies we're trying to attract look over, and they've already indicated they want to see more transit options. So when we're out competing for these great companies, one of the elements is always transit, or the availability of transit. I participated in the Brookings conference this morning. It talked about the importance of transit, not to the millennials, which everyone expects to hear, but it said that the majority of the boomers indicated that living within 3/4 of a mile from a transit stop was a top priority. So it's important to everyone. I think that what we'll find is we make this investment, it will cost something, every investment does, but there'll be a payoff. And I think it's worth the payoff, and I would really prefer for us to have at least available, and I would say be aggressive and drink lots of coffee and don't sleep, but have the SHART plan ready to go in 2 or 3 weeks.
Commissioner, no one has ever told me to ingest more caffeine.
I believe you want to tell you to invest just for the Commissioner Beck, you know, you don't make promises you can't keep. Commissioner Beckner, then Bergen, then DeRoche. Her and then Mr. Go ahead.
Well, if I can, going on Commissioner Sharp's note, I think we would absolutely have to end with Dr. Paulson's. I think they're both right. I think we have to, obviously, we've got shortages that have to be taken care of in the shorter term. We've got a system that's been woefully underfunded, capital and operational-wise, that has to be caught up. But then we do have to look out into the future. And for me, this is more of an investment. And that's what, to Director Davin's point, we absolutely have to outline to the people what the value proposition is. And I think that was part of the failure in 2010, amongst other things. People looked at what we were spending, and they didn't understand what they were getting in return. And so ultimately, they weren't willing to spend money. I mean, think about your own finances. You know, even as the tight times that we're going through, if you found something that you thought was worthwhile to yourself, to your family, and you answered the value question, you found a way to pay for it. And so if you outline to the people what they're getting and what the investment would be, you know, they're going to find a way, if they agree with it, they'll find a way to pay for it. And it's part of our jobs also to outline the benefits that even if you have no intention of using transit, you win. You win by more vehicles getting off the street, that's more time, that's savings in gas, I mean, on and on and on. There's benefits to everybody by having an improved transit system. So it's going to be, the importance is going to be building the value proposition and showing people what they get for their investment.
Commissioner. Mr. Roche.
I just, since roads came up, I just wanted to say, I think we do a disservice to potential funding of our TDP if we try and mix many things together. And I think the example of the stadium tax was just that. People were expecting this, and then all of a sudden, when there was no road money from the CIT, you know, it makes them lose faith in that type of tax. So I really would express that we ought to try and go out as a standalone issue on transit, go on a standalone and let the merits stand for themselves and let the people decide. And that's what I wanted to clarify now. And well, and just one other thing, I really like the idea of funding it locally. I think with the example we have of the existing Metro Rapid where we did use county funds, we were able to do it a lot quicker. We didn't have all the strings and holdups that we typically get with federal funds. So I like the idea of locally funding these types of projects.
Ms. Bird? You defer to her? Okay. Anyone else? You take over. Anyone else before I speak? I see no one. Okay. Catherine, a couple of things on the total annual operating expenditures per resident. Marco, if you want to put that up on the screen. A couple of things. One, the thing that jumped out at me is that most of the systems that we're looking at here are systems that have a rail component to it, primarily, except for Jacksonville, I believe, Orlando, and well, I shouldn't say even Orlando. Orlando's not going to include some rail in there, I assume. And then also, it looks like, yeah, Raleigh-Durham. Of all the other ones, they do have some kind of light rail or even heavy rail associated with it. And I saw in Portland, Scott, excludes capital, so that's a percent. All of them. All of them, okay. I just want to make sure I was right about that, because I was thinking, why are we excluding capital? Okay, I want to make sure. Well, you know, I was looking at it, I was thinking, wait a minute, why are we doing that? And here's the thing, we understand that rail can be not only a great economic generator, but it is more expensive on an upfront cost when you're talking about rights of way and actually putting down track. It becomes a more expensive alternative. It doesn't mean that it's a worse alternative, it just means that the capital costs upfront are more expensive. In addition, for us, when I look at this number, I don't look at it in terms of, woe is us. We're not really that far off where Raleigh-Durham and Orlando is at. But I think that all three of the cities that are mentioned there need to improve their transportation options. I think Orlando does, and Orlando's trying to do something with Sunrail. Whether or not that's a success, time will only tell. Same thing with Raleigh-Durham. They are really a test case too because of the number of universities that surround that area and the research triangle. I think one of the problems that we have here is that we keep talking about transit sort of in a bubble. Transit is not something that is disconnected from everything else. Every piece of economic development that we deal with has to deal with transportation in some way, whether that's roads or buses or light rail or any of the others. And I think sometimes we lose that. I think that what has happened with our leadership policy group is they try to look at those key economic spaces and say, all right, how do we change things? How do we make things better? The main thing that comes to it is that you cannot grow a transit system or a transit network without dollars. And until we come to that realization and report it to the people that are going to vote on it, if there is a referendum, I won't make our three county commissioners say yea or nay today, but it is important for us to make sure we understand that it will cost money. And we have to communicate that all the time to the people that we represent on this board. For me, I just came from Evanston, Illinois. And they had lots of different options to go different places. And I was calling to find out, I was flying into Midway, which is in south of Chicago. And that is about a 30 mile, maybe a 18 mile, 25 mile, something like that, trip from there to Evanston. Lots of traffic, lots of other things. I asked someone who lives in the Chicago area, I said, how do I get from there to here? He said, take a cab. He didn't say take a train, which stops there. He said, take a cab. Now the reason he said that is because the number of stops I was going to make, it would have made an hour and a half trip. Again, it's the knowledge that we have knowing that it's going to take that long. And I think that we need to communicate that to the public, that no matter what we do, it's going to take a while before we get to that point where
You can be in your home in South Tampa and say, I'm going to get on the bus or rail and I'm going to be at the beaches in an hour. That's a long way off. And I think that everyone that's here that's interested in transportation has to understand that. But having said that too, I think that we need to do better in terms of what we provide. The technological changes that we've seen, the demographic changes that we've seen, some of the things that we have talked about here in this board are important to making sure that transportation is going to be on the top of our list. Mr. Sharp was mentioning World War II. What's strange is that some of the biggest ridership was in 1946, primarily in Chicago, New York, and some of the other big cities. You know why? Because they had rations of gasoline, rations of automobiles. There was no way to go, and the federal government was paying for the billeted ticket for each one of those servicemen returning. So, the idea that there has never been public financing of transit is incorrect. It has always been there. Private entities do not get into this business until federal money, state money, local money is into it. Cleveland was used as an example. Cleveland has about a $4 to $5 billion, that's a B, so you didn't make that mistake, that is a truism. The General Accounting Office said that $4 to $5 billion has been invested along the health line. Now, the health line is a BRT system, and what that means for Cleveland is those areas that were underdeveloped or non-developed become economic engines for that city. That's what we're talking about here. We have to continually talk about how we can improve our economy by using transit. And that doesn't mean everybody's going to get out of their cars, because I know if I can go to Chicago and go up to Evanston and they're telling me to stay in a car or to stay in a cab, then it's the same everywhere. We're no different. The only difference is that we're not putting a real effort forward, and I mean both in terms of how we think about this intellectually and how we think about this to our bottom line. We really have to get a serious conversation about this. The last referendum was not that conversation. The last referendum was, unfortunately, I think, derailed because of lots of different things that were happening. We had a high-speed rail discussion that was going on, and a lot of people voted against it because they were voting for high-speed rail. And again, I think that we don't communicate enough, we lose out on it. And we as a community are going to lose out unless we communicate better. About our next steps in terms of this TPD. I said TPD, TDP. I also, I am a Tampa guy, so Tampa Police Department is always at the forefront of my discussion. The discussion items that we have for HART service levels, establishing relevant, attractive transit services, I think we pretty much went over in terms of this. One of the things that, in addition to what Commissioner Becker has asked you for, we need to see real numbers in terms of what that's going to cost, how much it's going to cost per person to put into transportation to develop a much more robust system, or if the status quo, what that's still going to cost. If you're still paying the same amount, or maybe a little bit more, maybe we ought to discuss that and say, you're going to double the size of buses and you're not going to get really better service. Which, in a way, that's kind of what we're talking about with our graphic that was there. So we need to make sure that they know that if it's going to be a more robust system, we have to tell them, this is the investment you have to make. If you don't want to make the investment, this is where you're going to be. If you make the investment, this is our covenant to you that we will provide this type of service. That's really what it comes to. And they trust us with the money, and I think that over the course of my 3 years on this board and with the group of people that are here in this room and on this board, we've done a great job. And I hate to brag about us as a group, but we've done a great job in terms of how we spend the public's money. And I think it's a great discussion item for everyone out there when they report this in the newspapers that HART's board has been very strong. We've been very collegial, we've disagreed on certain things, but for the most part, we've made this system run with very little money. And we've run it very well. And that's a testament to you and your staff, Mr. Hale, when he was here. And I think that to this board, it's a testament to us too. So, Ms. Egan, if you have anything else to add to that, what's our next steps in terms of the TDP?
The TDP numbers, again, we will get out ideally in the next few days. We have a lot of our finance folks who are out, but we will get out the information we do have. So the first figures, the maps, the doubling of service, we can get that out pretty quickly on what that service entails, what the price tags are there, and the ridership presumptions that we have made. A bigger, broader one, we will again have to default to industry generalizations without going through the whole modeling process. We wouldn't have exact numbers. and not to be chicken in the egg, we wouldn't go through the whole modeling process until we had a whole plan, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll come back and say, here's what we are reading, and here's what we would expect this kind of return to be, but there will not be an exact ridership number.
Okay, that's fine. I think that for us, we need those numbers in order to see what we're looking at and have a real idea of what we can become from where we are at now. Before I go forward, I want to ask the staff, did somebody turn off the air conditioning because we talked too much? Okay. If someone in the staff can go, I'm not the only one that's hot in here, I hope, you know. Someone can find out what's going on with the system so we can, you know, get some more air in here, because there's a lot of hot air, we haven't got a lot of cool air. So, that me, not anyone else. So, the next item, I'm going to take on item A for discussion item. I think we discussed quite a bit about what our future is going to be and what we can talk about. Now let's talk about what the leadership group has been doing. Mr. Merrill, if you're still here, oh, there you are. You were hiding back there. Yeah, that's what you faint. I hope not. Mr. Merrill, thank you for being here, and thank you for agreeing to be here in this hot box.
Well, no, thank you. Thank you for turning on the air conditioning. How do I find my slides?
Mr. Sandusky. There you go. Don't tell me the person running the air conditioning is running the power truck. Thank you, Mark.
Asking you to see that this distance. All right, well, thank you for having me here. And a lot of what you hear from me sounds a lot like what you heard from Catherine. And that's because, yes, we do trade emails at 10 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock in the morning. And HART staff, as well as your chair, prior chair, Fran Dallin, and current chair, Mike Suarez, are members of the leadership policy group. And so there's a good reason why this will sound very similar. So let me just start by saying that what is a leadership policy group? I'm not going to assume that everybody knows everything, so let me just quickly go through that. Leadership policy group consists of the 7 county commissioners and the 3 mayors of the 3 cities and the chair of HART. And that mix was chosen because that group represents those officials who can actually levy some form of revenue, taxes, fees, in order to pay for everything that you're talking about. That doesn't mean we have ignored everyone else. In fact, we have layers of working groups here. At the project level, at the finance level, at the manager level, including the Expressway Authority, FDOT, go through the whole alphabet soup, and they've all been at the table now for over a year. And so it's been a collegial effort. What does the Transportation for Economic Development mean? It means moving people and goods cost effectively, conveniently, reliably, safely, with interconnected mobility. And you look around at other authorities throughout the country, MARTA and Cleveland and Milwaukee, and it's the same mix of things because it's customer driven. One thing I did leave off of here is to relieve congestion, or at least mitigate increased congestion in the future, but it's sort of implied. So the word economic development is part of the title because it's the bedrock on which this all is based, and your chairman just summarized that for you. You can't build and run a transit system unless there's riders that support it, unless there's a revenue base to pay for it. And the way you do that is by focusing on creating higher paying jobs, by creating employers, by incentivizing employers rather, and making certain land use choices that makes all that possible. So greater access, more better paying jobs, increased value for residents and businesses, enhanced cultural and entertainment opportunities, and higher learning and enhanced job skills are all what this group is really looking for. So what defines success is all of these things. It's medical tourism, it's walkable streets, it's intermodal centers, it's livable centers, it's denser development in certain areas, and more. So to achieve the success, we're really looking at our two groups of things to try and balance here, because it's also about balance. As my chief financial officer always reminds me, you can have anything, but you can't have everything. Sometimes it really annoys me, but it's true. It has to be consumer driven. It has to be reliable, affordable, and equitable, otherwise folks won't continue to ride it. That was certainly my experience when I went from Milwaukee to a driving experience to Europe, where I had all kinds of opportunities to ride transit that I just didn't know existed. And I tried it. It's a cultural change, but it's reliable, it's consistent, it's affordable, and that's what makes it different. It also has to be multimodal. That was stated here just a minute ago. Bus, rapid transit, bus solutions, we believe at the Policy Leadership Group are really the foundation of what we're working on, because it is cheaper than rail. It is something that can get in the ground faster. It is more flexible because it's not fixed guide rail. That doesn't mean to exclude rail. It simply means that as you grow into a system, as you grow into a culture that's more transit-centered, a great place to start is with buses. And you look around the country at all of the transit authorities, they all started as bus systems, much like we are here. We grew into not overspending our means, but very carefully, consumer-driven, looking at the market, building ridership. You get to a place where suddenly you're a fully functional multimodal system that has all of the pieces that Catherine talked about, so I'm not going to double up there. So we know one thing, transportation doesn't pay for itself. It includes roads, it includes transit. Just because we pay taxes at the pump, or that we pay taxes to the federal government, we pay taxes at the pump means that we pay for roads. The federal government pays for the lion's share of roads through our taxes that we pay the federal government. We must attract choice riders. I think that's something that Catherine covered. We also have to optimize what we currently have, and so this gets into the discussion of multimodal. It's about bus, it's about transit, but it's also about what can we do with our existing assets. So one of the cheapest and easiest ways to relieve congestion is by optimizing intersections. Not even building an intersection, but optimizing the existing ones through intelligent traffic management. You can squeeze out a lot of extra capacity for a lot less dollars, but it does reach a point where you just can't then anymore, and you have to look for a solution. The high-speed ferry is an item that is considered optimizing existing asset. Water that we haven't used, I'm not promoting it, I'm not saying anything more than it's an existing asset. Timing is everything. I think we do have to be competitive with the rest of the country, with the rest of the world. We have to be smart. We can't rush into it, but timing is critical. Equity and mobility and funding solutions, this is another thing coming out of the 2010 election was a lesson we learned. There's got to be something in there for everyone. It's got to be equitable. We've held some, what I would call sort of modified town hall meetings over the last year that myself and some of the managers and Philip Hale before Catherine attended. It was very clear. The message was, if you want me to pay more taxes, I want to be able to use what I'm paying for before I die. And they said it half jokingly, but I think a lot of them were serious. And it's true. And not everyone wants transit. I love transit, you love transit, we all love transit, but guess what? Not everybody in this 1,000 square mile county of 1.2 million people wants or will ride transit. They do want better sidewalks. They do want circulator buses. They do want bike ped trails. They do want better flow for traffic. And those are all things we have to validate. We can't just ignore that. The county has $127 million in transportation projects that have been on the shelf throughout the recession because sales tax disappeared. We couldn't afford to pay for it. Even though the CIT did pay for a substantial amount of transportation projects, We ran out of gas, no pun intended, and we had to park 127 million projects that people that we all serve have said we want through public hearings over many years. This is not a phantom list of projects. These are projects that people have asked for, people who will pay, who do pay taxes and will pay taxes. The implementation governance step is critical. You started that discussion here a little bit. All of the work that we're doing at the policy level is great, but getting in the ground is all that matters, because results, in the end, is all that matters. So the way we look at it from a policy leadership group point of view is local mobility solutions, but regional mobility partnerships. We know that we don't exist in isolation. We're part of an interagency mobility constellation, but we have to take care of our own needs while we're looking towards regionality. So, June 25th visit, the workshop coming up, the policy leadership group, will be a pivotal moment for them, for the group, because we will be putting forward a comprehensive composite transportation solution list, a proposed list. And I'll say that again because it's been construed and misstated and twisted every which way. It is a proposed list. Not final, because there's a robust public engagement process, but as you have all just said, and I agree with you absolutely, you got to take something out that people can see, feel, and touch to ask if they want it. You can't just simply say, do you want more transit? What does that mean? The survey that we did, I think it was referenced earlier, was never intended to do that. The policy leadership group said, reach out through a statistically significant survey and ask some broad questions. And then we'll follow up with more detailed public engagement. So, transit solutions, everything you've heard from Captain. Bus rapid transit, express routes, circular buses, BRT, people movers, also existing CSX. CSX is doing a capacity study for us on existing lines. All that simply means is it's part of the first step that you have to go through, just as they did in Sunran. CSX has to agree that there's capacity and they're willing to talk to you. That's all that's happened. But it's an important question to ask. Livery, including taxis, zip cars, bumblebees, and all kinds of fun stuff. Intermodal transit facilities, which we know have to happen. When you ride a subway, you know you're going to have to switch. Some of the best subway systems in the world, you still have to switch. And you need a place to do it where everything kind of comes together. And then, as I said, existing unfunded capital improvement projects that have been around for a while. On the transportation solution side, it's really things that support or tie into the transit solutions. So express lanes, toll lanes, intelligent traffic solutions, intersection improvements, road expansions, bike ped, and unfunded CFP. So as we've been going through this, we've looked at key economic areas and said, if we do this list of projects, and Policy Leadership Group, you can go on their website, on Hillsborough County website, you can see by key economic space a list of projects, a mix of various modes. We've estimated what those projects would do to help relieve increased congestion over the next few years. And so you can see on the left percentage of congestion that is mitigated. West Brandon, for example, 60% less congestion by doing a certain amount of projects that are on the list. So where do we go from here? We did the consumer survey in April and May. That was sort of the high-level one. This one proposed mobility, funding, and governance solutions. And then a period from August to September that was alluded to, which is really the more detailed, on the ground, sitting in Starbucks with a clipboard. That's the one I want. Doing town hall meetings, speaking engagements at civic clubs, other surveys, but based on a proposed list of projects, the cost, and some funding solutions, so people can kind of see, if you put it all together, you know, what does that mean? That will take 3 months, 4 months, whatever it takes, and then coming back to the policy leadership group for some final choices, because if there is to be a referendum in November of 2016, all wisdom says you need a good solid year to market that. And so keeping that in mind, that would give us about a year to take that out to the public. Deliverables, it's really three pieces to it. Looking for mobility solutions. You've heard some of that, public-private partnerships, equitability, and governance solutions. Who implements it? How's it get implemented? What kind of solutions? Multimodal, local, regional. Those three have to come together in order to provide a return on investment, execution, and adequate assets to really take the community to the next level. The way we've looked at projects is first public safety. We still have a deficit in public safety, but as you all know, we have one of the worst records in the country for bicycle deaths. That's one example. Bicycle accident deaths, I should say, not bicycle deaths. Enhancing and preserving existing assets, economic development, regional interconnectivity, and looking at our major spawning projects. Possible funding solutions, existing revenues don't really help us out very much. Gas taxes, CIT, ad valorem, existing grants, they're either already pledged or have very little capacity left. New revenues on the other side, tolls, premium access charges, transportation utility, sales tax, mobility fees, etc. All things that go into the mix. And then P3 opportunities, as the chairman pointed out, P3 is not free. There's no private entity that will pay for everything on their own nickel. There's always a concession payment somewhere. But this is kind of the alphabet soup mixture of possible funding solutions. So finally, this thing called governance, and I purposely stayed away from identifying any particular entity. However, as we all know, we've been talking about HART because HART is represented by, right now, the county, the city of Temple Terrace, and Plant City would be willing to join as well. HART forms the basis of a good, strong bus system that can be evolved. But it really, I think, has to be viewed in terms of vision, bus, rail, intermodal facilities, and supporting infrastructure. Various funding sources. We're going to need a lot of federal and state grant money to do this. And that is something we can get to. We have to show that we have local funding to do that. We have to do some things to get ourselves in a position of getting a high score for New Starts money. We can get there. Operating revenues you're all familiar with, fares, tolls, development, development advertising, and investments from the private sector and the public sector in terms of taxes. Somebody asked earlier, what does a 1 cent sales tax produce? Currently, because we already levy sales taxes, we know what the sales tax generates. A half cent generates about $100 million currently, the current year. So a whole penny would be $200 million. If that was grown at 3% average growth over 30 years, a half cent would generate about $4.7 billion. That's based on assumption 3% growth. And a full cent, again, grown at 3% average, would be about $9.5 billion. Someone who pays $1,900 a year in sales tax based on $27,000 in taxable purchases would pay about 75 cents a day on a full cent sales tax. Rough numbers, but it gives you a sense because I know that you asked. But this governance entity really then has a big job ahead of us. Real estate development, management, design, engineering, construction, transitory development, operating a rail and bus system, and over on the lower right-hand side, interfacing with other agencies to pull us off. The other agency that the policy leadership group asked to throw into the mix at their last meeting was the PTC, but not in terms of absorbing the PTC, but by contract or joint venture, because, as Catherine pointed out, the first mile, last mile problem is really the key, because I can tell you, I won't get another car. I won't stop driving my car in Florida in the rain and the heat if I get to the last mile of my trip and I gotta walk. That doesn't happen here. It doesn't happen in mature systems. It doesn't happen in systems where this is thought out. So that's a critical element. But those are kind of the pieces that, you know, you all and policy leadership group can work together to kind of put together in a package. So with that, I'll happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr.
We're a little bit warm here.
It's not as warm anymore. I think it's cooling off.
Excellent.
It's not a reflection of our reception to you, sir. I hope. Mr. Rocher.
Okay. I wrote notes all throughout, so pardon me if I go through them. You made a statement that the BRT is the foundation, and then on your transit solutions graph, you have the BRT demonstration project. You also said it's flexible. We have the Metro Rapid, which currently is a BRT. I would call that a demonstrator project, so I'm not sure. Are you alluding to the Metro Rapid there, or are we talking about something else?
No, bus rapid transit would be, for example, a line from Brandon to downtown to the airport. And that's it. It emphasizes speed. It emphasizes addressing a certain type of transportation. And then potentially hooked into an intermodal center that would take people from the intermodal center to the airport via the people mover that Joe Lopano wants to build. So that's really a different animal.
Well, because I'm not sure did the policy leadership consider the TDP, because we do have bus rapid transit as one of our lines up and down Highway 60. We do have it downtown to the airport. Was that? I guess what I'm having a problem understanding is how does our TDP overlay with maybe some of your proposed solutions? Are we working together on the two, or are these totally different?
Yeah, we're working together.
Okay, they are together?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, and when we talked actually in preliminary meetings about a demonstration BRT, we talked about Brandon to downtown, and then in the TDP, the next corridor that we have identified as Kennedy. So we'd be interested in going down the median of 275 when it's finally paved and the lanes are done and they're open. We are tangent lost.
Why don't you let her finish?
Well,
You know, I mean,
okay,
go
it's a
ahead.
good question.
No, I understand, but I mean, she may get her answer before you. Go ahead, Mr.
Okay, and then on the slide where we're talking about possible funding solutions, one of the existing revenue is the CIT. Are we currently projecting any new projects on our CIT, or are we, because the way I understood it, we are going to be paying down all the projects we did on the front end? We'll be paying that to 2026, just to pay for the projects that we've already completed.
The CIT sunsets in 2026. There is some debt that all the jurisdictions have. Sandy County has debt as well. So largely, a good portion of the CIT that remains will pay off the debt, but there are some pay-as-you-go projects that are programmed through the end of 2026. So there's, again, going back to what I said, we still have $127 million of projects, transportation projects that would have been funded with the CIT except for the recession.
Those were programmed, I guess, had to be pulled back like in 2010, 2009,
That's
with the recession. Okay. Because kind of going back to my question or my comment earlier when we were discussing the TDP, I think the CIT is a good example of how when you take a comprehensive referendum and you promise everybody all these different things, something could happen in the future, and then you pretty much have to stop everything. Versus if you had standalone referendums, maybe let's say do one for road funding and one for transit, you don't muddle, you don't like overpromise on one area and then maybe not have enough room in another area. So,
well, I guess to answer that, there would be some who would say the CIT never would have passed had it not been for inclusion of the school district. We got 25% in the stadium, law enforcement. And I believe that that's true. It failed once before that. The way the CIT works is that the county, I won't speak for the cities, the county commission approves projects in 5-year blocks that go through public hearings. So there's absolutely public engagement in 5-year blocks of projects. And course they get adjusted because a 30-year tax, you can never project in day one what project you're going to need in year 25.
And it looks like there's a lot of other transit projects that are not in our TDP, and I'm not going to go through that. I guess the real question that I had that I thought maybe we would get answered today is there was a vote taken by the policy leadership group to reconfigure the governance of HART, and I understand it was a unanimous vote, and I'm not, as a board member, I'm not sure where I stand in that, and maybe tell us what exactly was the vote for. I heard it wasn't binding, so maybe if you could go into a little bit about that.
The vote was, we're talking about an agency, HART, becoming, what is the next evolution of HART? And so a lot of projects that you heard Catherine describe were not about buses. They were about the first mile, last mile. They were about managed lanes. They were about other kinds of infrastructure. But the thing they have in common with your core mission is that they all support the bus system. So there are any number of models, and Dr. Polzin is much more expert on this than I. I've done a cursory study of some literature. I don't think there's anybody would say they have the right answer about how to do this. You have models where you have, like MARTA, you have a single agency that deals with rail and bus, and yes, roads that have something to do with buses and rail in terms of coming together. You have other places where it's a joint powers agency, where, for example, HART would stay exactly as it is, enter into interlocal agreements with a bunch of other agencies. That's kind of the way that Tampa Bay Water started, not kind of, it was. Tampa Bay Water originally was a joint powers agency by interlocal agreement between the cities and the county. They found that worked for a while, but didn't work so well, and they evolved to what it is now, which is actually a chartered independent authority that now has the power and the accountability and the funding to build the big backbone of our water and sewer system. So, in Hillsborough County, my utility system still builds the network that connects to the backbone, but Tampa Bay Water is the one that delivers the big pipes with the water. So the vote that was taken really was looking more at the Tampa Bay Water kind of a model, if you would. And so one way to look at it is that nothing happens to HART at all, and that the possible solution would just be in terms of membership, because other than the elected officials who sit on the board, there are other appointees appointed by those elected officials. Another would be to ask the HART board to take a vote about how it wants to reconstitute itself. And David can do a much better job than I. He's been talking with our county attorney, but basically, putting aside exactly how you get there, it's really looking at this agency as a more holistic, more comprehensive service delivery model, which includes the funding piece, because without the funding, you can't do the new vision plan. And we fully expect, the bedrock of the funding is going to be federal, state grants, and, something like a sales tax, because the sales tax is the one that really generates the most money, if that is what you want to do. And I think that's been said. I think the chairman said that, in the end, if we want to play the big leagues and we want to drive economic development, someone's got to be willing to pay 75 cents a day to help do that. And that's really what we're talking about. It's not a binding vote in the sense of, because as I said, it's either change our membership or have a vote by each of the elected bodies, the cities, the county, and this board, to do something, whatever that something is. Is that pretty good, David?
That's pretty close.
Okay, all right.
And I think Chairman Suarez mentioned how well this board has functioned, how this transit agency outperforms many others. And I fear by opening up the scope to many of the things you mentioned, again, the word comprehensive, that a lot of things are going to fall into the cracks that currently, and I think I hope that we're managing it at the right level. Not too micromanaged to let the professionals do their job, but yet, able to spend hours poring over a HART budget or, a TDP and understanding what's in it. And when you have, great elected officials, granted, they are on so many different boards, and I just fear that the quality, just due to the sheer limited amount of time that we have spending, participating on the board, is going to see this agency suffer in the long run. And I don't know, that's my concern, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay, next is Ms. Madden. Anyone else after Ms. Madden who wants to go? Yeah, okay, Ms. Madden, go ahead.
Interesting that I'm kind of going to build off of your comments too. I was thinking external. Thank you for being here. My first experience serving on a county level appointed board was in 1998, and I've been involved in community planning in the South Shore area for over 10 years now. I also have a concern in the restructuring that I've seen the proposals on, but while yours may be on the macro level, mine's more on the micro level. I think we all represent our communities, and there's a substantial difference between looking at maps and thinking theoretically and driving past the community and driving the roads on a daily basis. When I applied for this board because I understand that transportation is the core that economic development in any community is built on. It has to. You can't have new businesses. You can't have new thriving businesses if people can't get there. So, and transit has to be an option. In South Hillsborough County, that's where I live. I live in Ruskin and I work in Waimama. And I bring the perspective of the roads that I drive every day. It took years for those of us working in county planning, or in community planning in South County, to convince the planners and the transit planners that not everybody wanted to go to the airport or Tampa every day. And we now have circulators. Thank goodness, because so many people need to have an option to get to the store and to the doctor and to work. And taking away that service, reducing that service, or shifting it, everybody's got to have allocations. Politics is all about compromise and balancing the needs. I get that. But as South Hillsborough County has developed, and if you haven't been in the Waimama area lately, I would recommend that you drive down Waimama Road and look at the frightening number of new houses that are coming out of the bare ground that's been cleared in the past 6 months. I mean, the housing boom is coming back in Waimama. Just amazing, the densities that we're going to see in rural areas. When I look, I live in an old part of Ruskin, and my road, it was designed to rural standards, which means that it's not quite two lanes wide, and I have open swales. I love the look of that, but I'm going to tell you that is not quite traffic calming device now that it was probably 50 years ago when it was designed. When I look at the ladies getting on the bus outside the local daycare center to go down to the shelter or to the clinic, and you think, well, if the bus doesn't stop or doesn't come often enough, they can walk, except for that's down US 41, that's carrying a whole lot more traffic than it used to, and we don't, and it's still open. A lot of areas through there are open swales and no sidewalks, and I worry that without being able to come to the board and bring that level of detail, a lot of our intersection improvements, because the CIT was bonded out before the first development boom really hit, those intersection improvements were going to be funded through developer agreements. A lot of those developers are gone. The properties have been divided up. Development agreements, who's going to improve the intersection at US 41 and Shell Point? Because the property that developer that agreed to widen that intersection has 4 or 5 owners again. I apologize. I'm not asking a question, and I'm not even sure I'm getting my point across very well. My concern is, as much as we, along with what Director Jaroshi said, our elected officials, who are the decision makers, and I understand putting the power group together of the decision makers who do the funding, but there's a substantially different interaction that people who are not elected, who are in the community, who live on the roads, who ride the buses, have with this board and with the decision-making process when we are reduced to citizens advisory committees and technical advisory committees. If we do not have a seat at the board and a vote, then it is easier to forget the nuances required to provide economic development in our community. And the last statistics I saw were that 75% of the folks who live in the county live outside of the incorporated areas. So I would think that the voices at the table that are the appointees represent a pretty diverse group of viewpoints that are different than the elected officials and do have the time to drill down and think about what does this proposal mean to my community. I am concerned as to how the proposal, as I understand it, would allow our voices, or not mine, somebody else's, but like voices to still be heard in the process.
The way that other cities and counties handle that with a model similar to what's been proposed is by establishing stakeholder groups. And I'm just answering the question.
That's different than having a
I
vote.
understand. I'm just answering your question. And I'm not saying that this, I'm not making a value judgment. I'm just.
I believe that we had done a great job over the years in trying to meet the challenges of the needs of this community from a transportation perspective. We recognize that there are a number of challenges that in the future we're going to have to face. And whatever we do, we're going to have more money. I believe that it is extremely important to have community representation on this board, because we are those people that deal and drive those roads every day and within that community. And I think we will bring a very special interest to this board. And I certainly am concerned that whatever we do, that we eliminate that community interest in which the non-elected member of this board brings to this table. And I certainly wish that we would consider that as we move forward.
Before you start, Ms. Berman, anyone else after Commissioner Berman? Mr. Melendez, and then Mr. Bergen? Okay. And Mr. Polson. Melendez, Bergen, Polson. Thank you. Go ahead. All right, yeah.
The comments here have been great, and I think from my viewpoint, and I just want to make this final comment, I have for 4 years become very frustrated with all the silos, everybody operating independently and no one cooperating and collaborating on decisions. The Metro Rapid, great concept, it's slow, folks. It's a Metro quicker transit. And not to downgrade it or say anything bad, because it's done with great intentions, but in a collaborative mode, we would have said that needs a dedicated lane. And we need to do it when we have the dedicated lane, or something similar to that. And was the route right? Chairman Davin, we often questioned the routes they were taking. Were they right for what we needed for the ridership, and where was it? But I just want to, we're going to be getting a lot of comments, and we're flexible, things can change, and we're just kind of putting a baseline out there right now for discussion. But I will tell you, as always, I listen to the mayor speak at lunch today, at least once a week. I get to listen to him speak. I can almost give it now.
We all
We really are on the brink of something big in this community. I mean big. And don't think big and act big. We will still be in the silos talking about the same issues 5-10 years down the road. And honestly, I want my daughter, her husband, their kids, when she finally has them, to enjoy our community so that when they grow up, my grandkids grow up, they'll stay here because we offer opportunity. And I think that's the bigger picture, and that's what I've said ad nauseum since I've been on the HART board, is I'm gonna think bigger. I want to see the vision. And the vision plan is really good, but HART can't do this alone. It's got to be integrated into a network and the system so that it can be cost effective. We can go back to the public and say, we spent your money very well. It's cost effective what we have done. Thanks.
Mr. Melendez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And kind of on a note of what Commissioner Merlin said, the word silo, I think that's an appropriate term. Personally, and I don't mean to speak for anyone on the board but myself, but I think I'm more of an advocate of those silos communicating versus being consolidated or being centralized. That's just one person's opinion. And I think that today, and Mr. Merrill, thank you for coming. Thank you for putting together the presentation. And we do appreciate it, because I think your presence here represents kind of, different agencies or silos, coming together and communicating. And I think we have a duty then to stay in contact and to only increase this dialogue. I have a couple of observations and a question. And I don't know if you can pull it up, but the slide with the pyramid on it, the hierarchy of mobility solutions, if it's logged out, then don't worry about it, I can describe it. But if you go back to the green pyramid, everybody would look at that. And this is for those attending and the audience and the public at home. There's the figure. I tell you, I just wanted to give you full credit for the top of that pyramid, and I just wanted to acknowledge how important it is for the public to know that the fact that you have public safety at the top, and I know it sounds obvious, but that is so important. And then right below it, the preservation of existing assets and enhancement. That order there, I just wanted to give you kudos for that, because that's just a great representation. I think that safety is always paramount, and then below that is existing infrastructure. And to me, any innovation that we would do, bus rapid transit, anything, you can't get there on a broken sidewalk or not a contiguous sidewalk or failing infrastructure or a bridge. One of the things that I want, a couple of other observations are kind of relating to Dr. Polzine's comment that regarding innovation. I think there are some incredible, not just the P3 opportunities coming up, but also the innovation. We have the Expressway Authority designating the Selma as a test bed for autonomous vehicles. We have bus toll, which Thea has been championing and working in communications with that. I wanted to encourage you, if you would, to definitely take back at least this board member's focus on that innovation and not jumping over those opportunities. I think Dr. Polzine's comments are very warranted, that we look and see what's coming down the pipe as far as innovation. Not wait. It's closer than we think, and there are going to be meetings even this year here in Tampa on some of those. So thank you for listening to my observations. I have a quick question. You mentioned the infrastructure, and I forget the term used, but I think the amount was 175 million. Maybe it was an unfunded projects. And my question was, I thought that that number was higher, and so like a lot higher, whether it be roadway widenings, we can talk different things, but infrastructure improvements. What is the latest that the county, I guess, have there been reprioritizations and kind of a culling of projects to kind of hone that down, which I would gather probably needed to happen, but where does that number come from? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Again, it's different lists, different pockets.
Right.
The MPO has a list of unfunded projects that is quite large, but that's not what I was talking about. I was talking about just the county commission, the part that we control at the county administrator level, is $127 million of transportation projects that were on our capital project list 5 years ago, that when recession occurred, we lost ground, we had to unfund. But no, the other number is, again, it's a number that was developed years ago. It's not tethered to any reality today. And I would just encourage people not even to think about that. What we're doing now, what you're doing here, what we're doing in Council Leadership Group is really trying to deal with what are the realities today and what we're doing. So.
Thank you for that. And the reason I do appreciate the background, I think it will be important as we move forward to kind of play off of Ms. Adams' comments that I think we owe it to the public to not just, take care of our mission, but we definitely have to respect, listen and communicate with you so that we account for the other needs of the county and the area. So thank you.
Mr. Burke? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mayor, I appreciate you coming to share with us some of your insights. As has been touched on earlier, I think a lot of this, what we're doing is an important community dialogue. And there's no question about that. There's been a lot of discussion around the table from various members. I'm not sure maybe a quorum is in order at this point.
I think we're okay.
We'll put our things on the
calendar. I think we're still good.
So I have three basic things that come to mind in the whole context of this conversation. One, board reformation. A number of folks have reached out to me, expressed concern about this, and while I share a lot of sentiment, I'm fairly agnostic about where that goes. I can hear both sides, but I would say that anyone who's advocating for board reformation, as discussed, with a full elected set of officials, risks the fact that you politicize the board that has, to the point, not been very political. That will subject to lobbying interests. It will reduce representation, and it feels like power grab. Now, the reason I'm fairly agnostic about it is this. I know that when these things happen, power goes to people's heads, and there will be an overreach, and the political system will exact the price. This is just my thought. I can't make that call. At the end of the day, I believe that the interest groups who feed into this board will ultimately decide, and we'll see how that all plays out. The second point I want to go to is gridlock. When Mr. Gale was here, he told me that it took a year. They budgeted a year to getting all the permitting in place for a bus stop. This is an intergovernmental shape. A year? Really? And to Mr. Sharp's point, and Commissioner, I heard what you said about the idea that Winthrop isn't able to get what it needs, that HART is ready to go, but the county wasn't. What happens then? How does consolidation fix that? If the 7 members of the county commission, all of whom I would assume have a fairly decent relationship with the folks at Winthrop, can't get that done, how is consolidating going to magically fix that? I'm not sure I understand that connection. And we can take that aside. Somehow that can be committed to be a sidebar later. They'll need to consume this time, as we're obviously losing members, on a lengthy, which is probably detailed discussion there. Nevertheless, it's a question that comes to mind. And finally, if indeed the proposal that comes down commits a 50-50 split of resources between hard surface roads and transit, I think this is hard itself. Certainly the research will be able to explore that more fully, but from my perspective, that's hard itself. Thank you, sir. Thank you. And again, thank you so much. Go ahead.
Okay, just a couple, and this isn't a question for Mike, this is just kind of my reaction to the governance issue. And obviously, I thought about it a fair amount because I got plugged into the process. The first reaction out of the chute is that it implicitly suggests that, this agency might be doing something wrong and doesn't merit the credibility to go ahead. Because most often when people have had institutional changes coupled with referendums, they've done it in conjunction with an entity that didn't have the credibility to pass a referendum, hence they will read back. And I absolutely don't think that's the case. In fact, I know that's not the case. It's been an award-winning agency. I know the data. I know National Transit Performance data. And frankly, we've blown the socks off the rest of the industry for over the past decade. So I know we're performing relatively well, not relatively, exceptionally well within the context of the resources that we have available. So then the kind of next natural reaction is, obviously, if there's more money for an agency, the profile is naturally going to increase. The media will be more interested, the business community will be more interested, the public will be more interested, there'll be more contracts and more dollars and more everything. So implicitly the scale and the attention of the agency will grow. And that's potentially helpful for the agency in spite of the governance of the agency. That's implicit. And frankly, the people that are interested in the board might change. But I'm not against the change in governance at all. I think there's a couple of things. One, change just in and of itself is energizing. It's creative. It gets people out of the status quo, and it sometimes can be constructive. That doesn't mean there won't be backtracking. That doesn't mean it'll be perfect and easy. But I think that to some extent, that's appropriate. And frankly, it's kind of a small price to pay if it means we're going to have an opportunity to have some more resources for transit. If this is part of the consensus package, I'm all for it because I think more resources for transit is well worth that. I will kind of offer a couple of comments, and one of them really picks up on the previous comments, and that's not politicized transit. One of, I think, the virtues and the pleasures of serving on this board has been that it's not been political. There's three kinds of things that we divvy out to the public. We have hiring decisions, we have contracting decisions, and we have service provision decisions. And we've done an exceptionally good job in making sure that those are made by professional staff, with policy guidance by the board, and it's going to be more critical in a more political agency to make sure that that's true, including the service decisions. One of the reasons why we've been as productive as we've been is we're providing service where the market says it's needed, not where some politician feels it's needed because of their local thing. That's what's allowed us to grow ridership, and that's what's allowed us to be as efficient as we've been over the past decade or so. If you start chasing markets, it gets very, very expensive and productivity will crater. So I would caution folks with that. A second concern is I think we need a lockbox for transit. Whatever commitment the policy leadership group decides that they're going to make to transit for future funding, that needs to be protected so that the transit constituency knows that they're not going to lose their commitments for additional improvements first time a road project comes in over budget, or when a new commissioner gets seated in 2 years and has some new idea, a grand concept or an idea that they want to pursue. We have to have some protection. The service does need, I mean, a bus route takes a couple of years to mature. At a minimum, some of these projects take multiple years to implement, so there needs to be a lockbox type of thing there. Third, the politicians need to step up. And interestingly, today the last 3 people that showed up for the quorum were the commissioners. 2 of them are gone already. When I worked in Dallas, the joke in our agency was on board meeting days, the staff members would have to call each other's spouses and let them know that, yes, your husband's really still at work, because we had meetings from 3 in the afternoon till sometimes after midnight. And if you're doing active things, if you're changing agencies, if you're doing big projects, it takes a tremendous commitment. And frankly, the political players need to step up and be willing to do that. I know I personally approached the previous mayor a couple times about sitting on the HART board to symbolize the transit's importance, and there wasn't a willingness to do that for whatever reasons. But it's important for those folks to make the time commitments because it isn't easy. It's a complex business. And finally, any governance structure, it's a combination of people and process. We need to get all the details correct. There's a lot that's left of the details, but you need the right folks, and that includes including the right political leaders in place to execute. So anyway, that's my comments. I look forward to supporting whatever happens to resolve in the end, and I'll work hard to make sure that my concerns and issues get integrated into that discussion.
Thanks, Doctor. I appreciate it. I'm going to speak now, and I think this will probably be the last word on this because we're losing members left and right. I don't want to lose them when it was hot in here. We're losing it now when it's getting cool. So, Mr. Merrill, thank you so much for bringing this forward. You know, you and I had a meeting last week, talked a little bit about some of these things. You know where I stand. I disagree with the direction that this is going. But let me just ask you a couple of questions. The example that Commissioner Sharp was talking about that particular development and about parking rides and about transit, does your comprehensive plan include transit for that type of development or not? I'm asking you a zoning question, which I know is incredibly unfair, but
I don't really.
You don't know. Well, chances are it doesn't.
Probably.
He may be complaining now that something that he wants to provide now that wasn't actually part of his planning or zoning aspect at that time, and I don't know when it was zoned. It might have been before Commissioner Sharp, but the zoning decisions that we make as a board, from the city standpoint and from the county standpoint, is not what HART does. That's what you do. Okay, and I think you know that, and that's why I was shaking my head when you're making that comment.
No.
Because, hang on a second.
Okay,
Let me finish. Because it is a zoning decision. And when you look at your comprehensive plan, we added transit-oriented development in our comprehensive plan for the city that I initiated because we do want to see more developments have transit as part of their ultimate plan. Now, Mr. Sharp, did you want to say something about that?
Well, yeah, it was included, it was allowed for in the zoning. The problem was that.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Because I met with him at length, and his frustration was that the county did not recognize transit as mitigation for congestion, was still insisting that yes, he could build it. He could build it. We'd encourage you to build a parking ride, but you wouldn't get any relief from your responsibility and obligation to do roads and intersections because if the county said we don't do transit, we only do roads and intersections.
Well,
So you need an agency which is capable of looking at the whole thing, transit and roads and intersections, because there would have been a tremendous benefit. And now he's coming back to us again and saying, I would still love to build it if I had gotten some relief.
You answered your own question, which is you have some work to do on the county to try and solve your transportation.
Absolutely, yes.
Second thing, if I could, you mentioned about the managed lane for our Metro Rapid. I mean, if we had a managed lane, it would be great to have. Have you all talked about on the county to try and because is that the county road, am I right, or am I wrong about that? Because
Which one?
Nebraska.
Nebraska.
Primarily, but also some of the other roads that you control. Some of them are county roads, at least.
Yes.
Have you had a discussion about making that a managed lane in order for us to have a speedier Metro Rapid? I would love it, and I think that I would fight for it on the city side, but we need our help from our cousins in the county. So has that been discussed before?
It's being discussed as part of this plan because, as I said, we don't have any revenue to do it now, even if we wanted to. So yeah, it's part of this mix, but it would.
Yeah, it's part of the success of the Cleveland example is that they had a bus run through the middle of the, which is essentially the preferred mode for most of these BRTs. So again, this is, I think, a county thing would help us make that decision in the city. I will push forward in the city all we can. The next thing I wanted to ask you about this particular group, and I asked it during our meeting before, which is FDOT is not featured in our meetings for the most part. We are talking among ourselves without FDOT. Talking back again about managed lanes. If we wanted to do a managed lane, let's say on Florida Avenue or on Kennedy, that's controlled by FDOT. Without their buy-in, all the money in the world and all the governance in the world isn't going to be a whole hell of a lot because they control that particular resource, and they will have to we would have to be allowed to use that resource. Is that correct?
FDOT's part of the working groups. They're not part of the policy leadership group, although I just lost the name of the district secretary. Yes.
Okay. Boy, you're going to have a good meeting next time.
That guy, the bald guy. He did come and speak to leadership.
He's new, so we're going to give you a break on that one. So.
But yeah, they're part of the working group, so yes, they're folded into the discussion.
Well, there are several things, and that's one of the reasons why with the governance model that you presented, there's a lot of things that have to be decided at each level of government before we even get to this point. Having an overarching, and here's the thing, you're not talking about this group having a planning component, you're just talking about MPO being part of it, because MPO has to be part of it for for all intents and purposes. But the comprehensive plan of the county, the way that the county does things, the way that the city does things, we have these frustrations in our board constantly, which is transit is not just one piece. It's not all of HART's responsibility. And even if we change the governance according to what you had put forward, it's not going to solve those other issues. Until we start talking together, county boards, city boards, my colleague here from Temple Terrace, and talk about what does it mean to build a transportation system that includes transit-oriented development and those areas in which people are going to get to for their jobs and where they live. We're just kind of whistling past the graveyard, and that's my problem with this particular governance model. Last thing, I'm going to leave you with this, and I'll ask Mr. Smith this question. David, in terms of what our role is as a board, as a HART board, the county right now can change their makeup of who they appoint to this board, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, because there are 7 members from there, and I think that the population differential means that I think they're going to gain 2 more seats. Is that correct? Am I wrong?
I'm not familiar with the population,
okay,
but it is high population.
Yeah, I think that there was a, after the last census, I thought we were going to get seats. If not, then
that about a year ago. I don't think
there hasn't been any. It was you. Yeah, it was her. And my point is that if the county commissioners were on this board, they can make that decision themselves. Is that correct?
You're talking about changing the way they appoint the various people.
Meaning that my point is that instead of Mr. Bowers being here, Les Miller would be here. Instead of and Matt and Hagan would be here.
I know nothing that prevents them from doing that.
Okay. In terms of how we would have to change our charter or state law to meet the needs of this particular concept, what will we have to do?
The only constraint that I am aware of in the state law is that right now, without amending it, you have got to have 2 gubernatorial appointees. All the other appointees can be appointees who are electeds, appointed by the various other entities that hold appointed power. Now, whether we have to amend the charter, I have to look at that, but the charter can be amended relatively easily, certainly more so than 163. But the only state law constraint is you're going to have 2 gubernatorial appointees, period.
Okay, so that means for our charter purposes, though, we would have to change our charter.
I'm not saying I'd have to look at the charter again to make sure whether or not you'd have to amend that. But amending the charter is an easier process.
Yeah, so as an example, if the mayor wanted to say, I'm going to sit on it, I'm going to name 2 city councilmen, they could do that.
Yes, the city could appoint their folks as all electeds.
Okay. In terms of, if the charter's changed, does it have to go back to voters at all, or not? If let's say we left the gubernatorial alone, and we decided we were going to change the makeup of the board, do we have to go back to it, or do you know?
I don't know, but I will tell you, I can brought the charter for that very purpose. See what it talks about your board of directors. I look mostly at your authority, because that's what I thought your primary concerns were. There are terms of office. It seems to me that as the terms expire, the body that appoints them could appoint whomever they choose to.
Mr. Merrill, in terms of the governance model, I think you and I talked about this. There's a quicker way to do it, and I had suggested that we come up with some type of management group that actually is paid for by the city of Tampa, the city of Temple Terrace and County, and possibly maybe FDOT to actually put together these type of economic development projects that include transportation. I have been frustrated as a HART board member, in addition to some of my colleagues, which is HART does not do transit-oriented development currently. They buy pieces of land and are able to put their bus stops or bus stations there. But in terms of using our clout, in terms of a landowner, we have not done that, and we have not leveraged our relationships or potential relationships with business entities in order to come up with a way of doing TOP. Now, having said that, I know that you believe that it's better to have a change of the board. If for some reason there is no consensus going forward for this type of change, what problems would you foresee having this management group together to concentrate on economic development as it relates to transportation issues?
I think the main objection is the one that I described, which is it's unhinged from being able to act in a unified way to deal with projects that cross multiple jurisdictions, cross multiple modes. And I mean, just, if the board stays as it is, I think the concept of having more authority and more control over the end product, not complete control, but more control is a good thing, because it does allow you to realize an integration between modes of transportation in a way that is easier to do than if it's not. So the makeup of the board, whatever it is, doesn't really take away from the fact that you could still have much more authority and much more funding to be able to really deal with multi-modes of transportation.
Well, we're going to have to discuss about mixing of dollars, because we get ad valorem dollars directly by virtue of our agency as to what the county would have to give us, I would assume, based on the changing of it, unless we have to go back to the voters to change our particular reason for operating. If we're dealing with roads in addition to transit, then we're going to have to, I believe, go back to the voters. And if that's the case, then we're creating something that it could be inherently adversarial to each other. Part of the problem is that transit, the operations of transit, is so much more important. It's sort of the reason why you don't run the sheriff's department. There's a reason for that. It's not because there's an elected member that controls that. You're just not a cop, and you don't know the problems dealing specifically with that. You could administer it, and I think that I would have faith that you would run it very well. But there is a sense of what you need as part of that particular function in terms of running it. I think that there's a lot of ideas why the Port Authority director is a guy that used to run a Port Authority. The person that runs the bus system is used to running a transit system, and the Airport Authority is someone that used to run airport authorities. There's a reason for it, because the dollars that we spend as a public direct to a service that we provide. That's the difference between Tampa Bay Water and us. It is a service we provide. The land rights and everything else that we negotiated as Tampa Bay Water and as a group, they knew that they had to provide some answer for that, or else they were going to be starving each other of water. Us, that's not quite where we're at. We need the dollars in order to expand, of course, but the governance part of it is you still need someone who's an expert at transportation and transit, to run a transit agency. That's the big issue. So if you've got an economic development CEO that has maybe some ideas of how transit is run, but isn't a transit person, and then HART is underneath that whole group that you had, I think that we're going to have a problem running HART then as a system. That's really my biggest problem.
I think that the chart that was displayed really wasn't my chart, but let's just kind of get to the point you're making, which is that we've always anticipated that the person running this organization would be an experienced transit person, not an economic development person. I mean, this board, let's just say, stays as it is, and Catherine stays where she is because she's the best in the country, and you now have other divisions that deal with rail, and you deal with, first mile, last mile problem, you're dealing with trees. So that's what's being suggested. Not that this organization now becomes a stepchild of a much larger organization. This is, in fact, this is the bedrock of it. And going back to your funding question, it would probably be more like the way the CIT was shared out. So, for example, a large portion of the new sales tax would come directly to this organization, just as 25% of the CIT went first to the school board. And then there's a residual left over that gets shared between the jurisdictions to do their own transportation projects. So you're absolutely right. You got to know that this portion of the funding from now for the next 30 years is coming to you, so that you're not then arguing with me or anybody else about where your money's coming from. Because you need that clear direction, that clear funding source.
Okay. Thank you very much.
One last thing to clarify your question. Amendments are made by this board. The board of directors amends the charter, must be ratified by the constituent governments. So that's how you amend it. But the powers and authority that you have in the charter track the statute. So you really would not be amending your charter to grant more power and authority because you already got what's in the statute.
Just a comments on the one on the record, and I've shared this with both HART and town folks, but to the extent that this entity has a change in mission and to some extent board composition as soon as this November. We're in the process of adapting a budget going forward that executes the current mission. And if that mission's expanded, or there's a great deal of energy spent in detailing an action plan and a broader role in legal changes and charters and et cetera, those resources aren't in the current HART budget, and everybody needs to understand that, because that's a different expectation that's in next fiscal year. So,
I had a question. If the changes occur and we have this new entity, when would you envision this new entity being stood up? If we were to move, if the board approves in June, I'm talking the policy leadership approves in June, the changes to, or the new expanded or more robust HART, at what point would we, though, then see this new entity? Would it be in November 2016, after November 2016? Would it be sometime before? Do you have any idea?
Well, I mean, I think governance is along with projects and funding one of the key issues, and so I would suggest it probably should be addressed sooner, so that when we're going out to the community to ask for a sales tax, that they know what the body looks like that's actually going to be running the show. And so whether that's as you exist now, or whether it's as the chairman suggested with some sort of other task force structure or whatever it is, I think it needs, folks just need to know, here's the group, here's the organization that's going to make this happen.
If I could, I think that's an unfair question to him, because we make the decision how we're going to look. He has nothing to do with that.
Right.
And if you, Mr. Sharp, you understand that, right?
No, but he makes the decision. All four county appointees
Right,
are
that's
this
totally
November.
That's his.
So that's a decision point.
They agree. Right, but that's different. Right. I'm saying that you talk about the new HART. Right. The new HART is going to be decided by this HART. You understand what I'm saying?
Well, it also, if you're going to start getting into timing, I think it's probably premature. The first thing comes to my mind is, I don't think you want to build an edifice and then, heaven forbid, you get a negative vote from the public, then where are you?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have is that the roadmap laid out for how this change, we discussed earlier, there are different options for how it might occur. How, I mean, the policy group could take a vote, the county commission could say it wants to take a vote as well on its representation, how it's being represented by this board, separately of this board. Or we can, you had discussed, as, and I think you were using more of the model that's been used for the homeless coalition, or the coalition itself sat down, and after a lot of robust conversation, I'm not surprised, I mean, I would hope that there would be on this board concern and lots of questions asked about, well, hold on, before we just race down this road, what it might entail, because we will then miss things if we don't look cautiously. But I agree with Commissioner Merman, who's not here at this time, that for a more robust budget, we need a more robust organization. But I guess my question was back to, do we have because there's a lot of confusion out there amongst everyone as to how it would occur and the timeline for how it would occur. And then also as well, having a really thorough conversation again about the need, how it would operate, the benefit. Because for me, again, this is not for the purposes of just changing the organization. It's not for the purposes of the county to say we're not satisfied, because I would agree with what the resources we've had and what's been done. It's been very effective, but we want more resources, a lot more resources, and with those resources, still a more effective organization. And quite literally, whether it's the chairman, whomever, you don't like it, I don't care. I mean, I'm going to push for a better organization until it's proven to me that the one that we currently have is the best. And it's the best not just today, in this environment where, and yes, I will agree with you on many instances, the county has not been at its best when it comes to transportation. I've battled with the county just as much as I've battled here at HART since I've joined the board. But I'm still looking at how it might get better.
a better organization, where a developer doesn't have to go to 2 different government, or 3 different government, or 4 different government entities, but can come to one and sit down and say, this is what I'm trying to do.
That's why Jacksonville consolidated.
I started that road a long time ago, and I don't know how long that takes. It takes 30 years to get to consolidate. You need a Mayor Delaney, and 30 years. Was it Delaney?
Mr. Sharp and Ms. Evans, if I could interrupt you, I think Ms. Egan has a question, if you could, please, and I'll go to Mr. Melendez, because you had something to say too.
But I just would like to know how long, the roadmap.
No, there is no roadmap because the vote that was taken, the policy leadership group meeting is a non-binding vote. And actually the discussion that ensued after the vote was we needed to hear the feedback from this workshop today, and there needed to be more discussion. You know, the recommendation that came from the managers group to the policy leadership group, of which I'm a part of the managers group, and Chairman Suarez brought this up rightfully so in our private discussion last week, which is that, you know, from an implementation point of view, as a county administrator, from an implementation point of view, the manager said, we think this is the best thing. But we don't get to vote from a policy level and from a political level. It's really, you know, this group and the policy leadership group that really needs to decide on what's best for the community and what's going to get us over the goal line, frankly. I mean, because as I said, the only thing that, I won't say the only thing that matters, but one of the things that really does matter is funding, and that it be fair and equitable, and we could stand up a good plan and justify it and take tough questions.
Hang on a second, Mr. Sharp. Mr. Melendez wants to go now, and then Ms. Deb. Okay, go ahead. You have plenty of private time with him. I mean, we don't get a chance to play with him every once in a while. I think, did he answer your question?
Actually, you staff, the grant staff and executive office and GC, please give us some time to go to confirm what strings are attached to our grants with what we can spend it on or not. We would definitely want to make sure that if there is a change or anything that's being discussed and us looking at doing other stuff, we will allow to spend money on it, depending on the funding source. I mean, our fares are one thing, our advertising revenue is something else, but 48% of our budget is ad valorem. We do get a not significant portion from state and federal grants, so please allow your staff time to work with GC to make sure that we know what rules are out there, so we stay on the right side of it.
Ms. Melendez, and then Ms. Deb.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to just voice, I guess, some agreement with my chairman, or our chairman, in that and fully acknowledge, I mean, I think robust, bold debate is good. I think we acknowledge that. And I believe in, you know, if you believe in something, don't apologize for it, go for it. This is the arena of ideas. But with that, if the question, so there was a vote, a non-binding vote, and I wanted to acknowledge that, yes, we would have to vote as a body to change our charter, to approve the change. If that day comes, there will be lots of questions. I mean, I have other questions, but I'm not going to throw them all out today. But if this really does come before us, I mean, again, I appreciate, Mr. Merrill, you coming and informing us, but if it does come before us, I will have many questions, because I wanted to share my agreement with you on your point. Thanks.
No, yes, somebody agree with me. Ms. Deb.
I agree with you.
I would just like to, and I don't have a position.
Get your microphone. I'm sorry.
I don't have a position yet. I just don't have a position yet. But I think there are a lot of questions that are not yet answered. For example, the thing that I was tracking on while you were speaking, Mr. Merrill, if we change this organization, however it changed, and we went to referendum, and the referendum failed, where would that leave this organization? We haven't talked about that. I would personally appreciate it if you would stop comparing this to the Homeless Coalition. First of all, their record was quite sad, and there's a lot of reasons for that, and I sat on that coalition, so I know real well I speak. But they weren't a taxing authority, and they didn't have the kind of record we have. So when you draw a comparison, please don't compare this to the coalition. I would like to see more information before we go into our next meeting, because otherwise, what we'll have is a continuation of opinions. And, you know, opinions are like noses, everybody has one. I'd like to see some facts. I'd like to see the rest of the questions answered before we have too much more dialogue. Because I don't think it helps Mr. Merrill shape up his answers to us if he doesn't know what the questions are. So perhaps we could have some mechanism for compiling the questions both for Mr. Smith and for Ms. Egan, so that by the time we meet again to discuss this again after the June policy will be, it's a little more coherent.
I agree. I want to talk to my board members for just a second. I was going to ask and see if the public wants to speak about what we've talked about. It was a little unfair because we do public comment beforehand. Mr. Smith, is it okay if I allow the public to speak for 3 minutes each on what we just talked about?
Yes, you may.
All right. Is there anyone in the public that would like to speak before us now about what we presented? Ms. Calvert, anyone else? Ms. Calvert, please, come on. And thank you for sticking this out in both. I know I was going to say, it felt like you were playing basketball for the San Antonio Spurs, but go ahead, please.
Well, thank you. This was very interesting. I appreciate the opportunity of listening to this workshop. One thing that I'm very concerned about, and I think I mentioned this previously, is doing things in an incremental basis. And I'm very concerned about a referendum, another 30-year referendum, and what that is doing. So I'll be real curious to see what the plans coming out of the leadership group, but it looks like, you know, they're pushing a referendum. But again, I think the more that we can do locally and not have strings attached from the federals, the better off the county will be in the long term. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the public that would like to speak at this time? I see no one, and having seen, not seeing anyone come up, I think we are adjourned. Thank you all.